OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It's 7:30 AM. You're very welcome along this morning on Thursday, the 25th of June to OTB AM. We're here with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10 o'clock. Dave McIntyre is with us today. Dave, how are you?
I'm very well, Ger. How are you today?
I'm good. I think everybody's beginning to tune in a little bit to the football. It helps that there are goals early in matches and that the good teams are playing well.
Yeah, it does. And we saw an awful lot of good football last night. I'm sure we'll get into it later. But Liverpool looked like the title champions-elect that they are. It seemed all they needed was 90 minutes against Everton just to blow the cobwebs off, because in the first half last night, they were really brilliant and could have been 2 or 3 up before that sumptuous free kick, probably as perfect as free kicks get from Trent Alexander-Arnold. And Manchester United looked like Barcelona last night. How much of that is down to the fact that Manchester United are as good as Barcelona, and how much of it is down to the fact that Sheffield United looked weakened and still in shock after being turned over so badly by Newcastle? I suspect it's more to do with the latter than it is that Manchester United are suddenly going to be title contenders. But it's something we can get into. But they were 2 really good games of football, and the home side absolutely dominant in both.
I think, and I'm going to talk about this a bit over the rest of the show, if Liverpool had 0-0 their way through the rest of the season, it would have been very disappointing. It would have been this real sense of anti-climax. At least for the Liverpool fans, victories like last night are going to be things that they can actually remember. That goal is something that the free kick and the Fabinho goal is stuff that they will actually remember. The Mo Salah pass for the Sané goal is also something that they can go, well, we played really well at the end of the season. We played really well at the start of the season. We won the league by 20 points. There's no asterisk. There's no need for an asterisk. The only asterisk is going to be the season was slightly delayed and the final few games were played behind closed doors, but we are the champions.
Yeah, look, we know what an asterisk means when it comes to sport. It means maybe someone who's won a Tour de France under dubious circumstances. It means a false start in the Grand National. It means maybe a season where there was no culmination to a championship at all. But if there is an asterisk to this Liverpool season, it's just that it was played within the parameters of a pandemic, and that the final games, which saw them lift the title, were played in front of an empty stadium. That's an irrelevance, really. I'm not sure Liverpool fans needed a reminder, but last night was a reminder of how absolutely dominant they've been and how brilliant they've been from start to finish. And it's got me thinking about the fact that the new season is so close in proximity to where we are now. It won't be an entire pre-season, for example. It'll be a slightly altered transfer window as well, perhaps with less money to spend. And I think watching Liverpool last night, and that first half in particular, is a reminder for everybody who watches Premier League football that the gap that the other clubs need to close to be in a position to ensure there is a genuine title race next season, at the moment, in my mind, appears to be insurmountable. It's a slightly different feel to what normal end of May finish would be, and a return to play in the 3rd week in August. I think the equation is slightly different now. It's something that obviously will be discussed in detail over the next couple of months, and clubs like Manchester City, for example, will be going into the new season on the back of what they hope would be a very fruitful Champions League business stage campaign. But at the moment, seeing Liverpool last night and the fact that they'll probably go on now and win the rest of their games comfortably, even after they've mathematically been declared champions, there is so much work for the other clubs to do because they are so incredibly far ahead of the rest at the moment.
I do wonder what it would have been like with Anfield a little bit nervy last. I mean, I don't know if they have any reason to be nervy is the problem, because they're 20 points clear. But you've seen the Anfield crowd begin to get a little bit, oh come on, just get it finished. Whereas actually no fans there. I know it's sacrilege to say it. No fans there actually, in a weird way, might have suited Liverpool last night, because it was just the players being the players. And I flicked between the two bits of coverage, and it does really sound like a pre-season friendly, and especially the way when you saw the Man United game earlier on with 5 subs in one go, like that is archetypal pre-season stuff, where you look over and the whole bench is empty, and you're like, all right, well, this game's obviously not that important. So I think maybe in a weird way, we can get into that a little bit.
I don't know.
As well.
Yeah, I think that's a stretch. So we can argue over that in a little while.
Right, 7:35 this morning. Dave's with us all morning. We've got an all-star lineup of guests for you. I'll tell you exactly what's coming up now. So we're going to hear from Kieran Cunningham speaking with Nathan last night about boxing's relationship with Daniel Kinahan, and the news that Tyson Fury was breaking ties with Kinahan in the last 24 hours or so. Brian Kerr is going to join us to talk to us about Liverpool Palace last night. We're going to go through the football a little bit more at around about 8:05. Pat Lam is going to join us this morning at around about 8:20 to talk to us about life at Bristol, which has been unbelievably successful for him basically since the moment he arrived there. We'll take you through the sports pages and then revisit the football with Kieran Cunningham and Jon Walters, and then the Conor McKenna case in the AFL. Catherine Murphy, an Irish journalist out there, is going to join us to talk to us about the backlash that Conor McKenna faced, while all the time he didn't actually have COVID-19. He's had 2 successive tests now. Both return negative, so there's a good chance that he might be able to actually play this weekend. And we'll get into, she's been in regular contact with him, so we'll get into the whole notion that this might force him back to Tyrone, or exactly what his plans are as well. So Brian Kerr and Nathan from last night's football in a few minutes, but first, here's Kieran Cunningham with the very latest on Daniel Kinahan's relationship with boxing.
So it's just a couple of weeks since Bob Arum was on News Talk Breakfast saying, when asked about Daniel Kinahan, if anybody asked me, I would say without question that I find him to be an honourable man. He's developed a great deal of trust with my company, myself and our people. What's changed over the last fortnight?
I think what's changed is a story that never really got any legs outside of Ireland has grown legs in the UK and in the US, and it's led to a lot of scrutiny of the way boxing works and of Daniel Kinahan's role at the very highest level of boxing. And a lot of people have been brushing over this for a long time. And now it's being highlighted. There are people uncomfortable with this situation, and they're uncomfortable that their own reputations might be harmed by being associated with Daniel Kinahan. Now, Bob Arum, even in that statement, in that interview with the Daily Telegraph, he talks of his love and respect for Daniel Kinahan. He's made it clear in a number of interviews that he has no issue with Daniel Kinahan. But on this story, it's very, very hard to know what to believe because the story changes all the time. Like MTK Global said a few years ago that they'd sold, Daniel Kinahan had sold the company to them and they had nothing to do with him. And he's threatened legal action to various outlets who indicated that Daniel Kinahan might still have a role. But now Daniel Kinahan is back in as an advisor. They sent out a press release saying that he's an official advisor to MTK. We know that he's been, because it's become public knowledge from the Fury camp and from Eddie Hearn, that he actually played the major role in organising Fury's last few fights. And Fury is an MTK fighter. So we were told in May that by MTK that Daniel Kinahan has nothing to do with MTK. And then a couple of weeks later, it comes out that he's been organising Tyson Fury fights for quite a while, and now he's an official advisor to MTK again. So you take a lot of this stuff with a pinch of salt. What I think one of the big takes to take out of it, Nathan, is Daniel Kinahan clearly, to me, had a plan to get to that, to be maybe the Mr. Big of boxing, because there is going to be a void there pretty soon. And that was behind the release of a bizarre rap video of a YouTube documentary around spreading a conspiracy theory around the Regency Hotel, and about the way I think various relationships like KHK Sports in Bahrain, who now cut their ties with Daniel Kinahan. The relationship with MTK when he's announced as an advisor, Tyson Fury announcing that he was the man who brokered a fight with Anthony Joshua. I think Daniel Kinahan was looking to rehabilitate his reputation within boxing, and that's a big blow for this. But it doesn't mean Daniel Kinahan is gone from boxing, not by a long shot.
That's what I wanted to ask you. This statement today and what's happened over the last couple of weeks and the way it's escalated since Tyson Fury's initial Instagram post where he so publicly thanked Daniel Kinahan, is it damaging to his ambitions within boxing as a whole, or just damaging to his ambitions of being a public figure within boxing? Can he now go back to where he was 3 months ago? And as you mentioned there, he was involved previously with Tyson Fury and negotiations and nobody knew anything about it because it was all behind the scenes. Can he, with everything that's happened over the last couple of weeks, go back to that sort of role?
He can. No, he definitely can. But I think that would be hard for his ego, because I think he has been in the shadows. Like even people within MTK and the Fury camp and Eddie Hearn and so on, Bob Arum, I'm saying they've been working with him for a few years. So he has been. It's no secret that Daniel Kinahan's been involved at a high level of professional boxing for a long time, but it was in the shadows. And I think he was very keen to come out of the shadows. I think he wants the kudos that comes with being one of the main guys in boxing, with being the guy who could broker maybe the most lucrative fight of all time. But it's very hard to see how he can do that now when those questions are out there. He can stay in the shadows and keep operating in the shadows, but as a figure that's out in the front, I don't know if he can do it. The question is, does it really matter to the future of sport? Like, to the people who should care about the morals and ethics of sports and the ways professional boxing should be run, does it only matter if Daniel Kinahan is out there in an official capacity? They're not bothered if he's there in an advisory capacity and still having a lot of clout. That's a big question for them.
Well, considering how influential it appears he has become, and we've heard so much about that, and you mentioned the links with Bahrain, and there was this summit that was due to take place, that all these different factions around boxing that for years haven't been able to get along, he was able to pull all that together, it seemed. You look at those figures within that are involved with boxing, why would they want to lose that? And would they be willing to accept losing that figure?
Yeah, well, that's one of the major issues with boxing, in that nothing talks louder than money. And decisions ultimately come down to money, and morals and ethics go out the window. And if you look at there were over 200 boxers on the roster of MTK. A lot of ex-Olympians, or very talented prospects, or they are world champions or former world champions, and they're looked after really well. Like, that's an important part of the Daniel Kinahan story. The way he set up MTK when he got involved with it initially back in 2012 and was there till 2017 till the buyout, and now he's back as an advisor. They pay well. They pay better. Boxers, even of a mediocre standard, get paid better than they would elsewhere. They get better facilities. They're better looked after. Some ex-boxers that have fallen on hard time, Daniel Kinahan has reached out to them and looked after them. So because of that, there's a huge amount of goodwill within boxing. There's a huge amount of people within boxing who'll talk him up. And then there's people who are very worried about Daniel Kinahan's involvement in the sport, but there's no merit to there. They're actually afraid to speak out. Very, very few people have spoken out about him.
In the last couple of weeks, suddenly with the escalation in media coverage, I think everybody in the UK media is very aware of who Daniel Kinahan is, and beyond as well. And we've seen it go to governmental level. Leo Varadkar spoke in the Dáil that there was contact between the Department of Foreign Affairs and the United Arab Emirates, where the fight may well have taken place. There were letters to Sky and to BT. Has that had an influence? Do you think that the powers that were there that suddenly took an interest in this have influenced that statement today from Bob Arum?
I would think so, yeah. No, because it's coming on the back of the KHK sports thing in Bahrain, of them cutting their ties. So, like, a lot of people within boxing want this fight to go ahead because of the amount of money they're going to make out of it. So there might be a fear there that this could jeopardize a possible Fury-Joshua fight. So I think because of that, that's led to the action. But there's a concern too that, the news cycle, because you work in sport, Nathan, how people move on so quickly. Like, the Premier League has started up again, golf is starting up again, so many sports are starting up again, and that whole roller coaster or treadmill, it just keeps going. So people that have covered the Daniel Kinahan story, they'll quickly move on to something else. They think, we've done our bit. But Daniel Kinahan is still there in boxing, and boxing's issue, it doesn't have a proper international governing body. It's got an alphabet soup of different governing bodies who operate with a light touch, who don't have the scrutiny, the kind of scrutiny on the individuals involved that you'd want. Like, for one example, Nathan, it's ridiculously easy to become a professional boxing manager. There's actually far more vetting. In terms of, if you want to take an under-10 hurling team in Ireland, you have to go through a huge amount of Garda vetting, which is very right and proper because you're working with children. But you can become a professional boxing manager when you would think, you need to be fairly vetted as well because you're operating at a high level. But it's so easy to do. And that's the problem with the sport now, that it's, Jimmy Cannon, the American writer, once called it the red light district of sports. And, it's still operating in those shadows. And Daniel Kinahan's in the shadows. And, that today doesn't change that. Really doesn't.
The Fine Gael TD Neal Richmond, who's been to the fore over the last couple of weeks from a governmental point of view, he was talking to OTB Sports earlier, and he obviously welcomed the reports that Tyson Fury was cutting his ties with Daniel Kinahan. He said it's an extremely welcome development, but far from the end of this saga. We need to have full clarity that Daniel Kinahan will have no involvement at all in this fight, and that real efforts are being made to exclude him from the world of boxing. That probably touches on the point you made there. You do wonder, those in power, how much they just don't want Daniel Kinahan to be publicly involved in boxing. They don't want him, as you say, with a Joshua Fury fight, standing on the stage at a weigh-in, being front and centre. And will their interest remain if he's involved in that role that we discussed behind the scenes, with that, as you say, passion for boxing that he has and the amount of boxers that he advises? If he is, and maybe he's not, and as you say, maybe his entire career built up to this moment where he was the main man for the biggest fight in the history of boxing. But if he is happy to remain within the sport, but just not in a public way, will the interest levels wane quite quickly as to what his role is?
Media-wise, that would be my concern, because first of all, I'd be quite cynical about the way the sports media has covered this, Nathan, because it's been out there for a long time. Like, there was a ban on the Irish media in 2018 for a year, and it was a very public ban, and I didn't see many journalists questioning it from other jurisdictions, you know, who were going to MTK fights and press conferences and never brought it up, and they did know about the ban. So there hasn't been that great willingness to get into this story before Tyson Fury and Bob Arum, in an interview a couple of weeks before that, made it so public that it kind of forced people to look at it. So, you know, where do you go with it now? You do need people to speak out, and you need people to campaign for proper governance in boxing. But the will has to be there. You have Bob Arum, who's one of the most powerful figures in the world of boxing. He's talking about his love and respect for Daniel Kinahan. He's been on News Talk Breakfast, as you said, and he talked about how much time he has from him. Eddie Hearn talked last week about how, you know, Daniel Kinahan's been around a long time. I don't know why people are so surprised by this. You know, is it that big a deal? Frank Warren has made it clear he's no issue with Daniel Kinahan being involved in the sport. So these are the most powerful figures within the sport. You know, if any move has ever been made against Daniel Kinahan, or you know, his role within the sport is to be challenged, people have to speak out. And it can't be, no, so much of the running on this has been done by a few crime correspondents in Irish newspapers. They've done most of the running. Virtually everyone else has ignored the story.
You mentioned the actual fight now and what happens, and you could see straight away the reaction on social media a few weeks back when Tyson Fury put up that Instagram post, the excitement that was there among so many people for this fight to happen. Is it now in jeopardy? Is Daniel Kinahan's role that strong in all of this that the fight itself is in jeopardy? And why is he so pivotal to this fight happening?
Well, because he was negotiating on Tyson Fury's part. So there had to be agreement between Tyson Fury's people and Anthony Joshua's people. And, you know, even though no contract has been signed and there's still hurdles to be leapt, they are saying that an agreement is there in principle and it's going to go ahead. So, you know, you can argue that Daniel Kinahan stepping out of the limelight now, it doesn't really matter if the deal is effectively being made. And I think, you know, ultimately, as I say, pro boxing, it comes down to money. There's too much money around this fight. Like, the purses involved alone for the two fighters figures between 100 million each and $500 million each, should be mentioned. Like, it's crazy money. So and that will transfer onto promoters and managers and TV companies. There's a lot of money to be made from it. So because of that, I can't see any willingness within boxing not to go ahead with it.
I'd imagine he wishes that Tyson Fury maybe wasn't quite so public with his praise.
Possibly, but, you know, you don't know, because there was such a concerted effort, or something that was definitely perceived as a concerted effort, to rehabilitate his image over the 3 months up to that, with everything that had gone on. So I think he was pretty keen to get his name out there. And maybe he didn't anticipate the backlash, though.
All right. Kieran Cunningham, Chief Sports Writer with the Irish Daily Star. Thanks as always for joining us.
No problem.
OTB AM.
So Liverpool are almost there. They can smell it now. They are almost the Premier League champions after a 4-0 victory against Crystal Palace. Brian Kerr was watching this match alongside me, and it was effortlessly brilliant for Liverpool in the end. They just strolled through that game, scored 4 wonderful goals, and probably gave the reminder that people needed as to how they got themselves in this position where they're 23 points clear.
Yeah, I think it was very important that they got the breakthrough. When they put out their best team, there's nobody who can live with them. They had, I would say, their best team on the pitch tonight. And there was an energy and determination about them to get the job done. They were that little bit sharper than they were against Everton in the Merseyside derby the weekend. But I still didn't think their full cohesion was there, or their full rhythm was there, but they were miles better than Palace. And once they got that opening goal in the middle of the first half from Trent Alexander-Arnold taking the free kick, they need to get that breakthrough, because Palace are a stubborn unit. They only conceded 32 goals in the league before tonight in 30 games. So that shows you the team always capable of getting results and matches. A lot of low-scoring games. They'd won the last 4 games, 3 1-0 victories and a 2-0 victory. So, you've got to break them down, try and open them up and try and get them to come out of that rigid formation and most organised and disciplined formation that Roy Hodgson has them in. And that opening goal, equally the second goal just before the break, was very important too.
And often, particularly when it's Palace, people will go back to the last time Liverpool lost at Anfield, which is 56 games ago now. It's hard to believe it's 23 straight victories in the Premier League at Anfield. That one of the things that Jurgen Klopp has changed is he brought a patience to Liverpool's play, that at times when teams were as well organised as Palace were tonight, the crowd, if they were there, would get frustrated, and the players would get frustrated and they'd make mistakes. That hasn't been seen at all this year. They seem to know how to win against any type of team.
Yes, they're a more experienced team. I think Champions League victory last year helped their confidence and helped their morale in terms of, yes, we've achieved something of quality. They've been hitting the bar, been close, lost the Champions League final, and second in the league last year. They needed that victory in the Champions League, I think, to really have belief in themselves that they could get over any type of adversity, any loss of players and dodgy goalkeepers, to win something as convincingly as they've done with the league this year. I mean, they are going to win it now. That cuts down on the number of points they actually need. They just need 2, even if Manchester City do the job against Chelsea tomorrow night. But their play has... They've embellished something in their game. They're patient when they need to be. They play at a tempo that other teams find it difficult to live with. They don't make too many errors defensively. They recover from them. They sometimes make errors and they get away with them because Alisson is such an outstanding goalkeeper. And players who come into the team generally fill in and do the job they're required to do. They've also not had too many injuries this year of the key man. And that helps, obviously. The rotation that's required hasn't done them any damage. They know they can rely on the squad. And you see tonight they're starting to bring in some of the young players that they'll be hoping in the future can replace some of the senior players. But at the moment the team is so young. I mean, Milner's really the only one over 30 in the team.
Mo Salah is a player who still, it seems at times, divides opinion, despite the fact in 2 full seasons at the club he's finished the Premier League top scorer both times. Could do it this season. He's on 21 in all competitions now for the season. Was tonight sort of a typical Mo Salah performance? Brilliantly taken goal, worked his ass off, yet at times frustrating with his passing and also a bit sloppy at times in front of goal.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think Mo Salah is at his best when Liverpool don't have so much of the ball as they have tonight, when he has room to run in behind defenders. And that sensational season when he scored, what was it, 44 goals 2 years ago? I mean, last season he got 22 league goals. This year he's on 17, 32 season before. That's phenomenal scoring for someone who's not, as I've said before, is not always in the centre forward position. But what suits him best is when teams play a bit of a high line or try to attack Liverpool, leave space behind for the counter-attack the ball over the top. Now, one of the ways teams have adapted their game to try to frustrate Liverpool this year is to play deeper lines and keep the full-backs in position and be aware that Salah is always going to be waiting on that long diagonal ball, running in behind, or maybe making a diagonal run onto a straight ball. Teams have made it more difficult for him this year, and when it's more crowded, he hasn't been as successful. They try to stop on his left foot and stop him shooting when he's coming inside off the right to the left to get the shot in. But still, despite that, he's scoring 17 goals. Is a lot of goals in the league still. But, you know...
So are people being harsh, or should you expect more?
I think people are being harsh, but I don't think there is that much criticism. I think overall, Liverpool supporters love Mo Salah, and they... You know, as they love this team, the excitement, the style, the gung-ho action, let's get forward. Yes, we leave the two centre-backs back and Fabinho hangs around, but it's such an exciting attacking style of play, not allowing the opposition get out of their own half if at all possible. A brave, courageous way of playing. So I think it's nitpicking a bit to pick on Salah and say, oh yeah, he should score more goals, or he should be more precise with his passing, or he shouldn't be as selfish. I think, you know, you look at his record, scoring goals the hardest thing to do in football, and he scores loads of them.
By the time Liverpool come back to Anfield in 10 days' time to play Aston Villa, they could well be champions, either by Manchester City failing to beat Chelsea in our live game tomorrow night, or we'll have the game on Thursday week, which everyone's so looking forward to, City against Liverpool, where if Liverpool get a point there, again, they'll be champions. We've seen how good City have been over the couple of games since they came back against Arsenal and against Burnley. Jurgen Klopp remarked that watching Manchester City last night, he couldn't understand how Liverpool had managed to go 20 points clear. Can you understand how there is such a gap, 23 points now, that a team of Manchester City's quality are that far behind this Liverpool team?
I do understand it, because City have lost so many games. I think 7 games in the league, and they have been deficient in defence. I mean, the main criticism has been they didn't replace Vincent Kompany, but none of the players replaced Vincent Kompany, and they didn't do as well. The full backs were, I think, other opposition found out and practiced and rehearsed in a better way how to exploit Manchester City's deficiency. So they conceded more goals, probably, I'd say about 2.5 times, I'd say, the goals they conceded last season, or certainly more goals than conceded last season. On a more regular basis in big games, they've lost goals. So that's why Liverpool have been more consistent. Liverpool have been able to, in some games, just kind of scrap it out and battle it out and get over the line. And, you know, we've seen the games, I mentioned the West Ham game before, when it looked like that was slipping away and they turned it around 1-3-2. But
well, you think of the big scores City have racked up this season. They've 8-0s, they've 5s, they've 6s. 4-0 is as big a victory.
Yeah, but they've also lost matches like the Norwich match and the Wolves match as well. And, you know, so that's what's made the difference. Liverpool have had the hunger. Maybe Manchester City haven't had quite the same hunger about it, because they've had success. They've won a couple of leagues recently. They've core group with the same players. They've been a bit unlucky with some injuries for defensive players, but not in the attacking position, but the defensive. And you look at the style of Pep Guardiola, and he always goes for it, and he is not inclined, and has never been inclined, to put much emphasis on defence, whereas Klopp was forced into making defensive signings that have ultimately changed Liverpool into the class outfit they are. I mean, it's been said so often, the signing of the goalkeeper Alisson Becker and the signing of the centre half have been the two most significant moves that Liverpool made this year. Who did they sign? Adrian. They had to play him because the goalkeeper got hurt in the first game of the season, and he did his job. And, you know, there was nobody thinking, no, he's a great signing from West Ham, they let him go, but he's done all right. Other than that, who did they sign? Minamino? Didn't sign anyone else of significance.
No, didn't sign Minamino till Christmas either.
That's what I say, he came in. So they worked off last year's squad, and they had the hunger from the outset, and they got off on a run in the beginning, and they've more or less done it now.
Just one other story from this week is what's been going on with Burnley on the pitch. So I think last week we spoke to you about the Black Lives Matter movement, and we saw the nonsensical airplane being flown over, and probably no point talking about that. But Burnley on the pitch, and Jeff Hendrick's position, and the position Sean Dyche has found himself in, where the players either refused to play or weren't being selected, and now we see that Jeff Hendrick is leaving the club. Like, it's an unintended consequence of what's happening. Is leaving Burnley right now the right thing for Jeff Hendrick, do you think?
Well, first, I don't think we should just skip the Black Lives Matter issue, because I think what happened the other night at the match was dreadful. And that somebody in that community that may have called himself a Burnley supporter thought that that was the right thing to do, to go to the bother of hiring an aeroplane, spending the money on it, and getting that banner composed to hang behind an aeroplane is just disgusting. But unfortunately, Burnley had a reputation in the past of being one of the most racist towns, or yes, big towns in Britain, and has elected far right politicians in the past. Now that thankfully in recent years that has dissipated to some degree, but obviously there's an element of people around who supported the contents of that banner. So it's really sad for Burnley Football Club and for the good people of Burnley. But, it has to be dealt with, and dealt with firmly if they can identify who was involved in that. Secondly, if you talk about the team, it almost seems most un-Burnley-like, because we've seen Burnley and admired them as a kind of very unified club. Their manager and the team seem to be almost totally cohesive in the style, and they come up from the championship, and they found a way to battle and scrap and become a solid Premier League team off a small budget, of a relatively small town or city, and with a playing style that was functional, but didn't receive too much criticism. And then they signed some good players, and they signed Jeff Hendrick, and they signed Brady, and we had an Irish interest, and Kevin Long was playing. But now suddenly they seem to be a little bit, there's obviously a severe tension between the manager and the chairman, the board, and the plans for the future in relation to the players. And we see Sean Dyche coming out saying that they didn't do what I've told them to do. I've lived within their means. I've never been particularly demanding in terms of wages, and when we've had to sell players, I've put up with it. But now he's kind of saying the club haven't acted on what I've said, and they've left me with what I have. That's what I would have taken out of it. And we saw a most un-Burnley-like performance tonight against City, where they almost, he looked like he'd thrown in the towel before the match and not naming, what do you name?
Seven subs, two of them,
two goalkeepers and a few young lads on it. It's a strange situation. But for Jeff Hendrick, obviously he's allowed his contract to run down, the last year of his contract. I haven't been talking to Eamon McLaughlin, his agent, recently. I'm sure Eamon would have an explanation for that. Obviously, Jeff has ambitions to play with a team who maybe he sees himself as being good enough to play for a team that might be in contention higher up the league than Burnley are being, whether in the Premier League or Italy, has been suggested.
Italy be exciting just because it's so rare for an Irish player to go abroad like that, and it probably does show where football is right now, that it's Burnley or AC Milan, and I don't know if there's a huge wage gap between what the two of them can play.
Well, I'd imagine
AC Milan is not what it was, obviously, 20 years ago.
But the point about AC Milan is that, like the Italian clubs have been, they seem to have pounced on English players who have been out of contract. Inter Milan in particular have been very strong in recruitment of Premier League players who were out of contract and were able to pay them big sign-on fees and wages. So Jeff Hendrick might come into that category. I don't think he's played particularly well for either Burnley or Ireland in recent seasons, but I think he's fairly highly thought of around the game, because I think he's a very good guy and he's a good professional and he's respected by his teammates. And I would imagine that managers and coaches in the game respect him as a very steady, honest player that can play in a lot of positions without grumbling about where he plays, and contributes to the team very much. So there's a value in that, and maybe some of the Italian teams see that. I would think from his personal point of view, yes, if that opportunity is there, he should grasp it and take the education that could go with playing in the Italian league and the learning that he could have in that. And if there is extra money involved in it, good luck to him. Maybe the Irish team will gain some advantage out of what he learns playing Italian football.
Maybe we'll have to get Serie A rights and keep a closer eye on him.
Yeah, maybe we should go to some games, Nathan.
Any game right now we take, Brian.
And investigate.
A trip to Salah on a Friday night has never been more appealing.
Investigate his performance in detail. Maybe even go to the training ground and have a look.
You've got it. All right, great stuff as always, Brian.
Thank you.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Thursday night football with John Giles.
Johnny Giles is a national treasure. When he speaks, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. When he's on the show, I was in the car the other day, I parked the car and I sprinted into the house and turned on the radio. I love listening to him. I love Johnny Giles.
John Giles, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Come on, Tom, are you nearly finished hanging that plasterboard?
I'm going as fast as I can, but...
Have you not heard? The Tech 7 adhesive and sealant lads have introduced a new foam adhesive, Tech 7 Foam Tack.
Oh, Foam Tack? I heard people talking about that, all right.
Well, you should be using that. Tech 7 Foam Tack is super strong, quick and easy to use, inside or outside.
You're right. I'm out of here.
Home early.
Nah, to the builders merchants to buy my Tech 7 Foam Tack, of course. Tech 7 Foam Tack, available now at your local builders merchants.
OTB AM.
6 minutes past 8 here this morning on OTB AM. It's Ger Gilroy and Dave McIntyre with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. If you want to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, and you can always just use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter. Or if you're watching on YouTube, then feel free to drop us a comment in the comment section there. Nice of Nathan and Brian Kerr there, Dave, to volunteer for a trip to, is it still Maranello where Milan train? Have they moved on from that?
I don't know if that's where they still are, but yeah, you certainly wouldn't have fancied a trip to them.
Am I mixing up the
Is
Formula One track?
Are they Ferrari?
Yeah,
Ferrari?
I think it's Milanello. I think was the rip-off that Silvio Berlusconi put in touch when he was all about, signing the world's most beautiful team.
It shows how quickly the world has turned in the last couple of months. You wouldn't really have wanted a trip to Lombardy 3 months ago now, would you? The fact the lads would consider going there, even if it was purely for work reasons, purely for professional reasons, shows that we've come an awful long way.
Purely for work reasons. That's exactly it. What about that Jeff Hendrick to AC Milan? I really want to see this happen now. I'd be like, it'll be great for Jeff Hendrick if he joins Celtic or if he joins some other team who is a step up from Burnley. Fair play to him. That'd be great. But actually, I want to see him play for AC Milan. I want a reason to tune in to watch Serie A and go, oh, this is interesting to see what happens. And I also think, bizarrely, his game is perfectly suited to that.
It is. Jeff Hendrick, he's cut a pretty frustrating figure for many over the last 2 or 3 years. Perhaps if you want to go all the way back to Euro 2016. Because I think he's a phenomenal player when he's in the mood or when the conditions and the circumstances seem to be right for him. I agree with you completely. I'd be intrigued, fascinated by a move to AC Milan just to see if he is capable of that step up. It's definitely within his remit, the way that he likes to play the game. He's very comfortable on the ball, and when he's confident, he's very eager to be on the ball. And there were times, particularly with Ireland over the last couple of years, look, this may have as much to do with the tactics or the lack thereof, or it may have as much to do with his confidence within that setup, that he has not been in that sort of player where he will go and demand the ball off the back four or his goalkeeper or the fullbacks. I remember watching that first half in particular against France in the last 16 at Euro 2016. Jeff Hendrick was superb, and he was very good throughout that tournament. And I'm sure even if you asked him whatever about Burnley, because I've seen him play live for Burnley a few times and he's had good games, but from an Ireland point of view, he hasn't reached those heights or even come close to it in the last 4 years. Maybe this sort of a move would give him a new lease of life. He's still 30 years of age, so he's got a couple of, maybe 3 or 4 really good years ahead of him. It won't be the same frantic, hectic pace in terms of how the game is played in Serie A as it is in the Premier League, and he might get to spend a bit more time on the ball. It would be great to see. I would be confident that he's got it in him as a player to be able to be successful if he throws himself wholeheartedly into it and learns the language and enjoys the culture and everything that goes with playing in a city as fabled and as cultured as Milan.
Yeah, and look, it's a great part of the world to live in for all sorts of reasons. The interesting kind of situation that we find ourselves in now with teams like Burnley, you're looking at Robbie Brady. I was just Googling his contract there. So he's got a year left on his deal. He must be looking over and going, I'm going to do exactly the same thing here. Like, run my contract down and see what happens next.
Yes, it's a really unbelievable situation that Burnley have found themselves in. And we've heard Sean Dyche publicly going against his board almost some of the last week or so, that he has obviously become really frustrated with the way things have gone on. The fact that you've gone into the last few weeks of the season, I know these are extraordinary circumstances, but that players who had their contracts expiring at the end of June were only offered an extension a month ago. This was a situation that they would have seen coming 3 or 4 months ago, that they had to get on top of very quickly. Now, they're in the fortunate position that they're not up against a relegation scrap. Had that been the case, they really would have been in an awkward spot. We've seen the situation with Bournemouth where a couple of their players have opted against extending their contract, and so they aren't playing a part in what is a really difficult scrap for them. Look, they at the moment look like they're going to go down. Robbie Brady's in a slightly different situation to Jeff in that he's had so many injuries over the last 3 or 4 years. He hasn't really established himself in the team as he would have liked to as a permanent fixture the way Jeff Hendrick has been. So I think Robbie needs to get a really good pre-season, a full season under his belt. But you're right. Why would he be signing a new contract in the next year unless it's on terms that are really favourable towards him? I know was it yesterday morning it's Stephen Hunt on the show, and he was asked if he would always be advising the player just to sit tight and hold fire, because obviously Robbie will be in a position to speak to other clubs from, is it January 1st into the last 6 months of his deal, and he will be able to assess all the options available to him as he gets towards the end of next season. But if he has a good season, you're running the risk, obviously, of getting hurt and damaging your prospects of finding another club. But you're also leaving yourself open to the prospect of having a whole suite of options available to you. It's the whole Scottie Pippen thing, isn't it? Do you trust yourself to stay fit and then keep the options open? Or do you fear maybe with your injury profile in recent seasons that could hit again? And if there's a contract on the table at Turf Moor, that you take it?
Yeah, it is about backing yourself. And I wonder, can you take out insurance against injury? You must be able to. I'd be interested to see what the offers are from an insurance company, how much a policy would be, and what it would pay out for that kind of loss of earnings for it. Let's talk about Liverpool, obviously, because they're the big story from last night. A routine victory. I made this point a little bit earlier on in the show, so if people have already heard this, fair play for being with us from 7:30, which we are every morning. You can get us on the OTB Sports app, by the way. It's the best place to get us. I'm delighted for Liverpool and for Liverpool fans that they're playing well, because if they had continued to play the way they played, like turkeys on Sunday night, it would have been a really disappointing, drab end to the season. There would have been this weird sense of like, we're not fulfilling our destiny here, and it would have been completely unenjoyable. Obviously they're going to win the league and Liverpool fans are going to celebrate that irrespective, but it would have been grim. There would have been a grimness associated with a 0-0, a defeat, a 0-0, not playing well, and everybody's like, oh shit, is this the end of what's happening? Whereas actually, the point you made earlier on is they're catapulting themselves into next season now.
Yeah, they are. Now, I'd qualify it slightly by saying they were up against a Crystal Palace team that are comfortably mid-table, don't really have an awful lot to play for, and I suspect the players didn't really go to Anfield with a lot of belief last night. Now, I know they were on the best winning streak of any club in the Premier League before last night's defeat, but you're going to the champions-elect. They're driving up in separate cars. They know they've a long drive ahead of them, because I think they were all going back in their own individual people carriers after the game. I'm just not sure they arrived with any real intent or belief that they were going to win the game. But that aside, you're absolutely right. In comparison to where they played in the Merseyside derby the other night, which was such a forgettable game, Liverpool looked like they were back to their best last night. And I think it was borne out by the starting 11 that Jurgen Klopp picked. It was vastly different from that which started at Goodison Park. Everyone was back fit, ready to go. And I think you've got a good point in that it's more than just closing out this run to the title, because that's going to happen. I mean, they only need 2 more points now. They may not need any more points if City don't get the job done tonight. But they are now looking at next season as well. They don't have a Champions League knockout game to worry about in August. They can focus solely now on getting whatever bodies in they think they need, getting rid of whatever bodies they think they need to get rid of. And in the knowledge that the gap between them and the rest is so great at the moment that they can just now play their way into next season, and from their point of view, hope that they just pick up where they'll have left off. They were as good last night in the first half as they've been against any sides in the first 6 months of the season.
Nathan's been in touch. This is why we pay him the big bucks around here, to say that actually Robbie Brady signed a 1-year extension a couple of months ago. So in essence, it is playing that game of roulette where you kick the can down the road and give yourself the opportunity to run your contract down. He obviously felt like, given his injury profile over the last 6 months, it was the right thing to do. And, you know, I wish him all the best with that. So, but I would hope that he plays his best ever football this year and runs the contract down.
Yeah, it's up to the clubs to ensure these situations don't arise. So, and I don't believe in loyalty of players to.
I agree with you, but hang on, sorry, I just, because this is my big thing with agents always, is like if there is some way of working the insurance, and even if there isn't, just take the risk from the player's perspective, because the difference between 40 grand a week and 60 grand a week, or 40 grand a week and 80 grand a week, is life changing. It's £1 million.
Yeah, I guess
every year of the new contract.
You're at a real risk if you're running your contract down through June. It's a little bit different if you're speaking to other clubs in January and you've done what, say, Aaron Ramsey did.
Yeah.
And you've got a club in the bank with 4 or 5 months of your contract still to run. Look, it also depends on personal circumstances as well, where you are in your life, how close to your peak you think you are you over the hill, what your injury profile is like, have you 2 or 3 young children that you really feel you can't be risking their future with, is there any talk from other clubs that they'd be interested in you? Obviously, if there's nothing on the grapevine, that you might be a little more likely to accept the deal that's on the table for you, and you may be getting a very good deal as well from your current club.
Yeah.
But we talk about players being loyal to clubs. I don't think they owe clubs anything. You pay that you're there for the duration of a contract, and they will cut you if they need to cut you. Speaking
of loyalty, a lot of people wondering. There were certainly headlines in various papers about how the trying time that Conor McKenna was having in Australia might hasten his return to Tyrone. I'm sure a little bit of this was wishful thinking from Tyrone perspective, but Catherine Murphy, who we're going to have on the show a little bit later on, has tweeted this morning: Conor McKenna has tested negative to COVID-19 for the second time. He's unsure what it means for his quarantine or training arrangements, but he's understandably delighted and relieved. This is the big story over the course of the last week, where Conor McKenna was essentially scapegoated by a lot of people in the Australian media for testing positive for COVID-19, when it turns out actually it was a false positive. All of his testing has been negative either side of that, and he should be cleared to play this weekend, you would think. But it's a fairly remarkable story where the testing in the AFL, I think this was the first positive out of about 12,000 tests. In the PGA Tour, on the other side, they've done about 2,500 tests. And granted, there are fewer PGA Tour members than there are AFL squad members. But at the same time, the money in the PGA Tour absolutely dwarfs the money in the AFL. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe they're close enough in terms of the actual overall value of those two things. But the PGA Tour are not coming off very well, with various caddies testing positive and a bit of a doubt of whether or not the tournament's even going to go ahead. They're saying it is going to go ahead, but like, when you're even having a conversation about it, Dave, something's gone wrong.
Yeah, I think something has gone very wrong with the structure within the PGA Tour's return to play. This was almost inevitable, because it appears from the reports we've seen over the last 2 weeks, and at least 50% of the 50 US states are seeing spikes in the number of infections at the moment. So I don't know if COVID-19 is absolutely rife in the States, but it's probably not far off being the case at the moment. So it was always going to be very difficult to bring a sport back at all. But they did talk about in detail the bubble that they were going to put in place in order for the PGA Tour events to resume, with the first 4 scheduled events to be played behind closed doors. Now, it strikes me that there has been a level of naivety amongst PGA Tour officials as to how exactly this would go down, because while players were expected to get the chartered flights to and from events, all stay in the same hotels, they weren't obliged to do so. And players, if they wished, could just rent a home near the course, for example, and then they would have been socially isolating within that home. But that wasn't the case. We know that there were players who were out at bars, there were players who were going out for dinner, there were players who weren't wearing masks, and that's not just the players. You've got the swing coaches, you've got their caddies, you've got their managers and their agents, and all these people that on the entourage that PGA Tour players have with them these days. And now you've lost Brooks Koepka because his caddies tested positive. Obviously, Brooks can't play if that's the case. The exact same situation with Graeme McDowell. Webb Simpson, who's the champion of last week, who won at Hilton Head last week, a member of his family has tested positive for COVID-19, and rightfully Webb Simpson has decided he can't put his family or his fellow players at risk by playing this week, so he's pulled out. There's 3 major champions in the field for the Travellers' Championship that have now pulled out. And the defending champion is also had to pull out as well. So I think it's a really tough situation for them, and they're going to have to reassess exactly where they are, because you're either in this together or you're not. And there's so much at stake. You've mentioned the enormous finance involved in the PGA Tour. If these players want to go out and make themselves available to play in these events, I think they need to sign up to an actual bubble and not the whole punctured, vulnerable, exposed bubble that really has been in place for the last 2 weeks. This was inevitable. They're going to plough on anyway. I don't think they can afford not to. But the chances of fans being at events, as was due to be the case from mid-July, I think that is incredibly slim of the chances of that happening. And this is an example for other sports. They tentatively dip their toe into the waters of a resumption, that if you don't lock things down, as they did in the Bundesliga, for example, this is almost certainly going to happen to you.
A reminder that Liverpool can, of course, win the Premier League tonight without kicking a ball, as Chelsea Man City is going to be live on OTB Sports from 8:15 p.m. You can get it on the OTB Sports app. Of course, it's live on Newstalk this evening as well. Chelsea Man City, Nathan and Stephen Kelly on duty for that one. And on Sunday at 4:30, it's Watford against Southampton with Stephen and Damien Delaney. Then on Thursday week, today week, it's Manchester City against Liverpool, where hopefully it will still be on the line. Manchester City against Liverpool, Nathan and Brian Kerr on duty for that one. And those games have successfully returned. And so far, there has been no major issues around the return to play in the Premier League. So they seem to have got things right in comparison with what's going on in the PGA Tour. I'm delighted to say that we're moving on to rugby, and I'm thrilled to have our next guest with us. Pat Lamb, good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. Good. Good.
The Smorgwich. Do you know what? Actually, it's great you bring that up straight off the bat, because when the whole event happened at the very start, I was thinking about the conversations that we've had over the years about how important it is for you and your team to welcome each other in a formal way every day. And the handshake and the multi-part handshake that you had when you were at Connacht was this kind of thing that we all fully understood, where you were talking about the 5 counties. What are you going to do now when all of a sudden your players aren't allowed to touch each other?
Yeah, we have a Bristol handshake as well, but I think the handshake's only a symbol of the actual connection. You know, you can still connect. You know, the boys do. I can see them when they're coming in. We're in it at the moment for stage 1 training. You can see the boys all doing the signs and, you know, all of this sort of stuff. But it's more about the connection, you know, getting eye-to-eye contact, saying good morning to each other. Although social distancing is still there at the moment, the handshake was, the purpose of it is to connect, and that's still going on, which is fantastic.
Yeah, because it did seem like it was an important connection, and that actually the whole culture of a team bonding from every second they're together is something that they carry out onto the field. It was a signifier and a symbol more than the actual specific physicality, I suspect.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, you know, the GAA, you know, these guys, they do it all the time in the sense of that connection, because they're from that hometown, they're from that county. It's easy to motivate yourself because I'm going to represent Galway or Mayo, Roscommon, Dublin, you know, whichever county it is in professional sport, because we come from all over the world or all over the country. It was the same in Ireland. You know, I had boys from Dublin, you know, playing or Cork or Limerick. It was important that not only we connect as a group so that we could go out, but we also need to connect with the community, so that guys, when you get right down to, you know, games that really matter and everything's on the line, what's going to push you that extra edge? You know, the guys around you and the people you represent. So, you know, and in a season, it changes every year. Every year, the team won't be the same. There's always going to be people coming and going. So you have to accelerate it. So put a huge emphasis on the one-on-ones again to make sure, you know, if you're going to come into, you know, the Connacht team or the Bristol Bears team, you know, you have to be someone who's brave enough to connect. Because if you connect, you'll get all the benefit for yourself and your goals, but certainly the team will and certainly the community will.
Pat, in terms of how odd the whole return to play is, what's that actually like at the moment, and how confident are you that we're going to see Premiership Rugby back on the schedule that we're kind of, I'm uncertain of exactly when that schedule is, but at some point in August?
Yeah, no, it's on track at the moment. We've got a big meeting next Tuesday to go to stage 2. I think all the directors of rugby and medical staff have been involved with PRL, the RFU, even to get to stage 1. I think the important thing, which, you know, was most is get a date. once you set a date, and it's great, I see the Pro 14 have set a date. Once you set a date, it forces everybody to hurry up and get sorted. And, if there's no date, people can take their time. I'll get that done later. But suddenly big meetings have been held. We're in stage one. This is our second week at the moment, and it's going really well. So it's a long day for the coaching and management staff. We've got to, obviously with people on furlough, there's a limited staff, but you're pretty much out on that field from 7:30. You're not coming off till 3:30, because normally you do one group and they all go, but they're coming in groups of sixes. You get a lot of work done. It's about having a plan, understanding, read the minimum guidelines or the operating guidelines. And, and that's what I always said when I was at Connacht, same when I'm at Bristol, is I've got to have good staff, and I've got fantastic staff here. So we're able to sit down, look at it. We put all the plans. Everyone's got their areas. We got all our PPE equipment was ready. Big Junior Paramore looks very scary at the moment, in his PPE gear and his mask, and he wipes the gear down after every group goes by. So it's it's just become a bit of the norm, but it's all based on the motivation, determination to get back ASAP. And at the moment, it's looking, provided there's no second wave or anything, it's looking good to start mid-August.
Pat, you look pretty relaxed, and you're rocking the lockdown beard there as well. But I just wonder how difficult the last 12 weeks have been, because I know you've had to let some players go. You can't really plan for the addition of players because you're not sure or otherwise the financial situation may be. Premiership Rugby doesn't seem to have been very clear on the signals it's putting out there as to what the return will be like. There seems to have been a bit of a row over the fact that they brought in PwC to help them on a consultation basis to get themselves back in a position where they can bring play back. I mean, has the last, say, 4 to 8 weeks in particular been particularly stressful?
From a personal view, it's been great with family time and so forth, but also planning, reflecting and reviewing, and feel excited where we're going to go. When you talk about the players, I mean, the first thing I did once I knew we couldn't get back together, when I arrived, it was the same at kind of want to make sure that we honour our leavers. So we did a virtual one online. It was about 2-3 hours. It was awesome. We had guys crying. Pretty emotional as we were able to put up some slides and clips of every single one of our leavers as a thank you. And then they also know we're welcoming them all back to do the jersey presentation once the season finishes. They'll all come back wherever they are, and we'll have a good night together. Hopefully social distancing is sorted by then. So that was ticking that box, and it was an important box to tick. And then obviously the new players have come in: Kyle Sinclair, Mitch Eadie, Ben Earl, and Max Malins and Saracens, Chris Cook. They've all arrived. Semi Radraja flies in today, which is great. So they've transitioned nicely into the group as well, and the boys are fantastic through the WhatsApp group. Guys have already caught up with them. And then as far as the bigger picture goes, well, I mean, we're blessed. I mean, we've got a fantastic owner, obviously, in Steve Lansdowne, who I would say, if the club was like it was 3 years ago, I wouldn't be so confident that would still be going, where he's 100% determined that, we're all going back to full salaries at some stage, when the time's right, while other clubs, are struggling and making cuts, which they need to do. That's fine. But I think the biggest thing here is that, what Steve and Chris Boy, our chairman, fought for was the autonomy to look after your own. So instead of being a collective that everyone's going to take pay cuts, everyone's going to, the salary cap, although they signed up for the salary cap, it was on the basis that every club had the autonomy to treat their own staff the way they do. And, one thing he always said throughout his business, he has always been 100% is always honoured his contracts. So we're in a fortunate place to all the players and staff at Bristol Bears that we have that sort of support. I think some of the questions that have been asked now have been forced on people. They should have been asked a while ago. I always believe, and we showed it at Connacht. We had, we knew our budget was nowhere near the other 3 provinces, but it's more like, okay, well, what do we got? It's the plan, it's the model, it's not spending. And I think people have overspent what they can afford just because they want the victory, or they want, so I always think if you're in the situation you are, look at the people who made those decisions. If we go back to the salary cap, if we go over the salary cap, that's going to be my responsibility and Mark Tainton, no one else's. There's a lot of things going around, but, I'm always around, I'm half full. Glass is half full. I'm excited. And the group have been, well looked after, and we're in a good place.
I've been using this line a little bit recently, but David McWilliams, the economist, always had the line about whenever the tide goes out, you get to see who's been swimming naked, and he's essentially talking about recessions, but you also get to see who has a boat that's properly been cleaned down and well hulled and is floating properly. And it seems like certainly the conversations that you've been having with everybody since you got there was that you want this to be run properly. And you've talked openly about the salary cap and how you were under it, and how it was one of your obsessions was to make sure that the club was never near the salary cap, so that you would have some wiggle room when the tide goes out. The tide is out at the moment, and we are getting to see which of the English clubs are well run. So at the time, it might not have seemed like it was a fair game, and it turned out it wasn't. But you were still playing by the rules with the long-term ambition of making sure that whatever was coming down the road, you were going to be able to stand over your decisions as somebody responsible for the salary cap.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the model that I've used here at Bristol Bears is exactly the same model I used at Connacht. So, you work out what is your budget, what do you have, and you can't go over it. And a really good accountant who set that system up for me. So I'm not an accountant, but all I know is that if I add a bit here, that's going to change this number here. So it's really easy. If an agent says, another 5,000, 10,000, we'll get the deal done, I look down, no, I can't. So I take it or leave it or get the next guy, But I think the big thing, and people talked about the salary cap, and we started signing quality players. Now, these players did a lot of homework on. However, if you look at it, I've only got 7 players coming in next season. I've got 19 going out, and I brought 3 local boys from the academy, have now got senior contracts, long-term contracts, and I've now got another 12 integrated academy. So people look at, how can they afford that? Well, hold on, 19, do the maths, 19 gone out, only 7 come in, and the rest are coming through the academy, which is exactly what we wanted and what we had at Connacht, bring the guys through. And and spend the money wisely. When I arrived there, money was spent all over the place crazily on players who were, injured, who weren't number 1 or 2. And I was thinking, how are we paying this guy this amount of money? So it was a massive tidy-up job to bring the model. And people think, you got Steve Lansdowne, billionaire. We don't actually have Steve's billions. We probably pay, we only have the salary cap. What we do have in Steve is security for times like this. But the trust that I built up with Steve is that in the 3 years I've been here, the amount of money that Steve's had to input has actually gone down pre-pandemic, obviously, but the bills are still going up. So hold on, how does that work? Record season ticket holders, record crowds. We've sold out the Ashton Gate many times. The boys work in the community. The investment of everybody getting behind our sponsors, more sponsors. So the revenue is exactly, so the model now, as Steve can see, we were tracking perfectly because we had a 5-year plan. And part of that plan, as well as not being reliant on anyone on the field or off the field, that if someone leaves, they go, that's fine. If I leave, someone steps in, we got a structure. It was exactly the same with Steve Lansdowne, that, we want to get to a point where Steve's not having to, the club becomes self-sustainable and Steve's not having to fork out more and more for us. And that model was working for 3 years. And what we are fortunate is that that's built the trust. So when the pandemic hit, Steve's trust has backed us up by support he's given us through it.
Pat, most of what you're talking about there has almost nothing to do with coaching, and yet at the same time you can't be a coach who's free to inspire your team to play a style of rugby or a brand of rugby that you want them to, unless you've got all this stuff sorted out. It's that hierarchy of needs that Jim Gavin always talks about. And I'm interested in when you realise that to be the best rugby coach you can be, you also have to be a businessman and a bit of an entrepreneur and somebody who does understand what your accountant set up for you and who is a good accountant and how to trust that person to make sure that this system is going to stand up to whatever rigours it needs to.
Yeah, well, I learned along the way when I got sacked from the Blues that it's all very well what I did with the team. I had no control of the organisation, whereas everyone has to come under the same vision, same culture, same, the way we do things has to encapsulate everything. So when I came to Connacht, when I was involved there, I made sure that, it needed to told the board there that it needed to be everybody. But the issue I had, even though I wasn't director of rugby, I was head coach. I put a clause in my contract that no director of rugby comes ahead because coaching is my passion. I'm not I'm a director of rugby who's on the field, who does a lot of the coaching. I run team attack, team defence. And the biggest issue that I had is if you do that and you have someone above you controlling all of these things, it won't work. And likewise, I can do all this, but then I wouldn't be doing a job I love, which is my coaching. So when I came here, I said to Steve, and the issue too, it was difficult. I was answering to a CEO, and that made things more difficult too, because I find CEOs can be difficult because of the basis that they have no personal investment in the place. And what happens is they can easily get a new job next week, whereas the owners, they're fully invested because it's their money. Coaches are fully invested because we're determined on the results, so we're fully invested. So when I got here, I said to Steve, if I come here, Steve and Chris Boyd, the chairman, I said, if you want me to come here, I only want to answer to you two guys. I do not want to answer, because I'll show you the plan if you believe it. And that's I am in a dream job where I laid out the plan and they've given me full responsibility to make it happen. And so, as far as recruiting of staff and players, as far as the group that we got, but I have accountability, and that's the plan. So it's easy when I put the plan in and Steve signed it off, but he's loving it because we're ticking all the boxes that are going along. The culture now of the place is whether you're the groundsman, whether you're the CEO, whether you're anybody, any player in the team, everyone comes under the same umbrella. And that to me is the key for success that I've learned from my experiences. Because again, the admin people can look at the team when we're going really well. Oh, we look how well we're doing. But when the team is struggling, I'm not sure what they're doing over there, but our area is good. Our commercial department, our budgets. But it's like, no, what I made very clear here, if the commercial team succeed, we all succeed. If the team succeed, we all succeed. And if we fail, we all fail in as well. So everyone knows there's performance and there's relationship. And I put the same acid on everyone in this organisation as I have. If I don't perform, I lose my job. You don't perform, you lose your job as well. It has to be high performance.
You mentioned results there, and obviously everything from the ground up is incredibly important, and that's sort of how you try to go about your business at Connacht. But the fact is, if the senior team aren't getting results, or if you're struggling to avoid relegation, you probably won't be in that job for very long. That's just the way the business goes. You're third in the table at the moment. I'm just wondering where your ambitions are now in comparison to what your objectives were at the start of the season, because I suspect, having gone where no Connacht team had gone before and winning a championship, this surely must be in your mind at the moment, because a good finish to the regular season, you're in the playoffs. There's no Saracens to deal with. You've already run Exeter very close earlier in the season at Sandy Park. I mean, are you in a position where you're better than run them close, beat them? So if you're in a position now, are you telling your players on the resumption, we are planning on winning the Premiership? Is that where you are now? Because they would be two of the most unfashionable clubs to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, it's the same thing I arrived at Bristol when I arrived at Connacht. I mean, everyone was telling me, we've got to get mid-table and so forth. But I said, fellas, it's not about winning the Pro 14 or Pro 12 at the time. It's about being in Champions Cup. Let's go higher than that, and then let's see what happens. So I remember I talked about Champions Cup. I talked about players playing for Ireland. I talked about Indigenous players coming through. I mean, the photo behind me, the reason it sits up there is one of the season ticket holders gave me a painting of the 5 boys who played for Ireland in a Six Nations game on the field at the same time. Unheard of, and that's what I said, is that when I arrived here, I said, fellas, they all talked about, we've got to get survival, got to get promoted first, because when I arrived here, they got relegated, and then they talked about survival. And I said, no, Champions Cup. I want to be the most dominant team in Europe, in the Northern Hemisphere. All right. There's no reason why we can't, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen without a plan and without some serious hard work and the right people. And that's so, I believe that when I arrived here, we aspired to that. And now I genuinely believe that, what we've built as far as our game, as far as our culture, as far as our leadership. I mean, our leadership is similar to when I wrote the Connacht. I was like, geez, who's going to be captain? Yeah, you all know Pat Lam didn't pick a captain his first year because I didn't know who were the leaders. Genuine leaders, until John Muldoon surfaced. I mean, I remember, I know Moles talked about it. I did think, I don't know if Moles is 7 when I first met him. Wasn't sure how long his future was going to be. And obviously now he's with me. And he ended up being a great player and a great leader. But that's what it's like here. Now I've got a really good leadership team. So while we aspired for it now, I now believe we're in a position with the team is that there's no reason, our expectations are there's no reason why we shouldn't be going to get trophies. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but we're certainly in a much stronger place from when I arrived here and inherited the group that I inherited and the changes that we've made. I feel really blessed by the work that everyone in the whole organisation has done. It's been a tremendous team effort to get us to here, but now we've got to go and win trophies.
One of the unbelievably exciting things about Connacht was their style of play, and I think that really helped to bring everybody along with you, because all of a sudden the neutrals were like, oh, I'm going to watch this team because when they get the ball, they're going to be really brave with it. Obviously, the skill level is something that they've clearly worked on, and they're not going to be stupid with it, but they are definitely going to, if there's an opportunity to attack from deep, they're going to go for it. Has your style evolved with Bristol? The Premiership seems like a far more attritional and physical league. Did that cause a rethink in any way, or how has your style evolved and changed?
No, the vision is exactly the same as the way I want to play. And if anything, you just have to. I always smile when I read people talk about our game. You just have to look this year. They did a highlights of all our tries this year, and it's unreal some of the tries that we scored and the skill level. And you just got to go back before I arrived in the way they used to play. But it's the way people are talking about it reminded me of what people said in Connacht. Now, the process of getting to where I want to get to, is where I'm not. My game plan is not about running everything. All right, it is about being comfortable to play whatever it takes to win a game. And there's lots of different ways, whether it's pouring down with rain or the wind in Galway, or it's beautiful sunshine, whatever it is that we know how to win. So you have to build it. But the number one thing I did at Connacht and at Bristol was the take away the fear. How do you take away the fear? Is that you got to be able to keep the ball, because players we're used to in their 22, we kick this ball. But I'm always like, well, hold on. If it's on to go and they're all standing back, why should we go? Actually, we can't pass the ball left to right. Well, our props can't pass. Okay, well, I need good staff. Let's start training the boys. Let's get the skill, but taking away the fear, and then you build. It's easy to start with the kicking game. Let's go kick. And then eventually, we've got to run. Oh, hold on, we've got no skills. So I always work from the hardest part first, which is the keeping the ball and the skill level. And we put a massive emphasis on that, like we have here. And then you can add all the different components. So that's why it's a 5-year plan. And 3 years down now, the team is a lot more complete than it was at the first year. Similar to when Connacht the first year, we ran everything. But we got to a point where we were really comfortable in relationships, first and foremost, comfortable in our skill level, and then comfortable in our knowledge of the Connacht way and now the Bristol way. Now, it doesn't, but if you can lose it the moment you stop working it. So every day, each training, each day has to be tougher and better than the day before. And if players don't step up, obviously they know. You put these vision and you put the plan and what the expectations are really clearly at the beginning. If people don't step up, they know that. I've let some really good people go because ultimately I need more. And and as I said, if we're going to be the most dominant team in Europe, or be where we want to get to, I'm going to need people who are hungry. We all saw The Last Dance. I need people like Michael Jordan. That they're determined. And when I talk about like Michael Jordan, I mean like his determination and to be the best. That's what we're after.
You need your Steve Kerrs and Scottie Pippens as well, though.
It was without a doubt, but to me they're the same as Michael Jordan, because at the end of the day, you had someone pushing, they could have walked away. But what did they do? They kept going. Steve Kerr, as you said, got punched by Michael Jordan. He punched him back. So to me, they had the same thing that Michael Jordan had. Michael Jordan pushed there, they went. They pushed, they went. Not sometimes some people push. I don't really want to do that. That's too hard, and then they walk away. There's no doubt there's players in there, but the Steve Kerrs and the Scottie Pippens and all of these guys. Everyone benefited because Michael pushed it another level and they took it up, and that's why the boys loved it. And it was great to see, because that's the era I grew up in, and it was pretty ruthless. You either you hardened up and you got on with it, or you were kicked out the other end. And obviously it's a different type of player now, but it's great for them to see it, because they're like, wow. So, but you don't have to do it exactly that way. It's more the mindset that I'm not satisfied with this, that I'm going to get to here. Michael Jordan was not the same player. He had the talent when he first started basketball to what he ended. He had to work for that, and that's what we're talking about.
We do a lot of stuff.
Try and be a nice person along the way.
Well, that's the thing. Well, I was going to ask that because, a lot of modern players wouldn't take what Michael Jordan was giving them. It's the whole Roy Keane. We've obviously seen that recently. There's this mad backlash. Roy Keane can never be a manager again because he would talk to players like that in the dressing room and they wouldn't play for him. And there's definitely an element of truth in that.
Oh, without a doubt. But it's more the mindset of each individual. Like I always say, the greatest gift that you can give your team is improve yourself. If you can improve yourself every time, then collective. And I got asked that at Connacht. I remember very clearly the same press conference at Connacht. I remember it, and the same at Bristol. All right, Pat, how are you going to get Bristol to be where it is? How are you going to get Connacht? I said, really easy. I said, individuals have to get better. If we all aim to improve ourselves and get better, collectively, we get stronger. And the job, my role in that is to oversee, to ask the questions. And people won't get better. The greatest tool I always said they have is their self-awareness. We all know you cannot help an alcoholic unless they know and they acknowledge they're an alcoholic. You can't help any player go another level if they don't have any self-awareness. So asking questions is massive. Like I used to say all the time in interviews, players would say, how do you think I played? And I said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you played? 10's your best game ever. Oh, I was only a 5. Why is it a 5? Well, I missed a couple of tackles. Well, in relation to what we coach, what happened on my feet, I was too far away. So what are you going to do this week? Your skills plan. I'll do some tracking with Mo this week. Good, excellent. So what have we done? We've asked the question. He realizes it wasn't his best game. He realizes the reason why. He realizes why he made those mistakes. Now he put it into his plan, and now he's taking complete ownership of it. And I can look out the window and I'm watching them doing their skills plan because they've taken ownership of it and they're getting better. And then our team gets better. Suddenly our team defense gets better. Like someone asked me the other day about our team defense. I was going through it and I said, where do you think your weakness is, your team defense? I said, the players. I said, the reason we get better is because the players continue to get better. But as they become better defenders, as in there's good tacklers, but defenders in the system. So, again, that's what I love about this game. It's the best game ever. It's the best team sport in my view. I believe it is because, nothing I can achieve or anyone in the group can achieve without people getting better.
I know, look, you've got to go, but you've been great with your time. One last question. We do loads of stuff with Stuart Lancaster here. We have a podcast series on leadership, and we've talked to him in depth about what happened with the England job. And it sounds very similar in a way to the reverse of what happened to you when you were talking about the Blues. It was like you end up having responsibility for one aspect. He ended up being responsible for everything and not doing enough coaching on the field. Listening to you, it sounds like you've got that balance perfectly right, where you've got the unbelievable responsibility and time to work on the attack and defence, while at the same time making sure that the contractual situation of the players is sorted out as well. All of this is leading me to the question where the skill set that you've acquired is perfect for international rugby as well. Is that something that is on your horizon after your 5-year plan is fulfilled? Is that something that is part of your ambitions in the future?
Well, I realised when I got sacked from the Blues that, I used to think, all right, I've gone from NPC, the Auckland team, to the Blues. Now, hopefully the All Blacks one day, international rugby. Obviously, my first coaching job was Scotland with Ian McGeechan, and so I learnt a lot there. I did the Pacific Islanders, so I got a touch of what it looks like. But what I quickly realised, hold on, it's like a school. When I'm a teacher, which school should I go to? It's about where I get where I'm able to do what I need to do, and there's clarity. So I said, I won't do a job unless there's clarity. So if I got asked, if someone said to me, oh, look, Pat, would you do the Irish job, or would you do the English job, or the New Zealand job, or Welsh job? First thing I said, well, hold on, what's your vision? And that's one thing I used to say about Irish rugby that I did struggle with. It was about getting to a semi-final World Cup. Man, for me, it's win the World Cup. There's no reason whatsoever. Set the goal high, but get a plan and work to it. And I always say, the moment you start thinking like a champion, you start talking like a champion, you start behaving and training like a champion, the better chance you're going to become a champion. Now, it's not guaranteed because there's a lot of hard work. But for me, if I was coaching Ireland, I'd say, right, all right, we're going to be number one in the world and win a World Cup. All right, now we take the plan. What does the plan look like? Then we get the right people. Then we get the right players. Then we get the right facilities. Then we make sure that the budget can line up to what we need to do. And if it doesn't, well, how do we get our budget? How do we prove? Obviously, the performance. So there's a model there to use. But the most important thing I need to know is who am I answering to? Because that's where I've always found there's a lot of people with agendas in this professional game. And I'm so blessed. So at the moment, I'm like, well, why would I leave the job I'm here at the moment? Obviously, with Steve and Chris give me so much, having so much trust in what I do, that and they know that now that I'm following the plan. It's not Pat Lam doing his own thing. It's exactly what I've said. And as Steve, whenever I present stuff to Steve, and he goes, well, it's exactly like you said. That's what's happened. He goes, great, just ticks it off like that. And so if I need a player and it fits in the budget, Steve's like, just make it happen. And I remember talking about Semi Radraja. I said, Steve, I'm coming to you because we have a marquee spot about Semi Radraja. He goes, is he any good? So I knew he was going to ask that. So I put together highlights, I put something, and he came back and had a look and he said, yeah, he looks good. He looks good. So we were able to get him. But that's the important thing is, again, I just bring up there's business, but there's relationships and there's trust. And you build that trust. It's like now I've got absolutely, I've got a lot of Irish people there. Kev Geary, head of, I don't know how Ulster didn't let this guy go. This guy is world class. He's our head of athletic performance. Rory Murray, again from Ulster, world class, best physio I've ever seen. Head of our medical. Connor McPhillis is my assistant coach. Him and John Muldoon. They're growing unbelievable, and one day I can see them coming back, and hopefully both of them will go and work in Connacht. But I can see I'm growing them to eventually all go back to Ireland and put some stuff, put some time back there. But they're world-class people, and that's what I need. So while they trust me, I now trust all of these guys around me to get their jobs done. So Connor works with me with Team Attack, and which allows me to do stuff as well. So I might oversee it. He gets stuff there. John Muldoon was working with me at Team Defence, and now I've given him, he's done a great job of now moving to forwards coach to grow him to go into become a head coach as well. And but now I've got awesome trust. And our alignment with our medical, our S&C and our coaching. Kyle Sinclair came in yesterday and he said, man, I've never been in a team where the alignment is so good. And I said, yeah, that's because these guys are world class and there's a lot of trust.
Look, it's brilliant that you're doing so much for Irish rugby still, and I have a strong sense that the fans of all of the Irish teams are going to be keeping a very close eye on Bristol's fortunes for the rest of the year. It's always brilliant talking to you, Pat. Inspirational in many ways. Thanks a million for joining us.
Pleasure. Gura Margaret.
Mahabare. That's Pat Lam. Dave, I can see why players are willing to run through brick walls for Pat Lam.
I'm about to run through a brick wall right in front of me here, Joe. Well, it's more plasterboard, so even I could probably get through it if I had to, but he's just an incredible man to listen to, and it would really surprise me if we don't see him in a head coaching role with a top-tier Test nation at some stage. I know from the way he's been speaking there, he's very much talking in the long term at Ashton Gate. It looks like he's settled into Bristol and has ambitions of them winning a European Cup someday, and that's not going to happen this season, probably wouldn't happen next season, but it's definitely something that could happen in the next 2 or 3 years. But there are going to be some very high-profile top-tier jobs coming up in the next 3 years, particularly after the end of this World Cup cycle. I'd be surprised if Pat Lam isn't highly sought after for a number of those. He's already said he'd love to coach internationally at some stage, and he even alluded to there his ambitions to coach the All Blacks someday. Well, he's certainly on the right track, isn't he? Yeah, 100%. That bit at the end there, it seems so kind of throwaway about where Sinclair comes in and says that the medical and the S&C and the physio are all aligned. I know of stories in the NFL where there was rivalries between different departments where players would be being past fit by the medical, but the S&C would be like, well, they're not match fit, and actually having them all work together, which seems like the most obvious thing in the world, because they seem on the outside, when you don't know that much about sports science, to be, well, these are actually the same thing, aren't they? And it turns out like medical and strength and conditioning and physio are all elements of the same part, but slightly different. And it's a simple thing, but even just hearing him say that we've got that already aligned, you would assume that somebody with his vision has been able to do that. But I think a lot of teams don't actually manage to do that. So, look, a future Ireland coach, certainly would be somebody who is in the mix. There is this assumption in Ireland that you have to be part of the system, and that has certainly been how things have worked. But would anybody in Ireland be disappointed to see Pat Lam as our coach? No, I don't think so. Yeah, well, part of the system in that, Joe Schmidt was part of the system at provincial level and then he went down, but there doesn't have to be a direct line. It doesn't have to be linear, does it? Pat Lam was part of the system. He left. There's no reason why he can't come back and move into the system again and it be the head coaching job with Ireland. It doesn't necessarily have to go from provincial to the Irish setup in that way. I think it does. I think Nucifora is kind of on the record as saying that, we would only ever appoint a coach. Look, you make your rules, but you break your rules under certain circumstances. If after Andy Farrell wins the World Cup for Ireland and he wants to go off and retire, and then Pat Lam comes in, I don't think if the IRFU were to break the rules for that, then I don't think anybody would be too disappointed. But look, it's just good to know that the other lads who have gone over from around Ireland who are working in Bristol are also getting on well too. Yeah, it does. Look, I think you could spin it in a way that you need to spin it, Jerry. If Pat Lam had declared himself available for the Irish job in 4 or 5 years' time, and the figure was being pointed at David Nucifora saying, well, look, he's not come through the system. I'm sure Mr. Nucifora could find a way to deliver that news if necessary by pointing at the Connacht situation. Yeah. He's won a Pro 12 championship with an Irish province. For me, that ticks any box that needs to be ticked. Well, obviously, we're speaking in major hypotheticals here, but it's good fun as well.
Totally. Right, let's get to the sports pages next here on OTB AM. But first, here's a bit from Liam Toland on Wednesday Night Rugby last night with Nathan. A very wide-ranging conversation tackling some of the social issues that are happening in the world at the moment. Have a listen.
I came back and my brother's 4 boys are playing rugby. So they've, Killian, who's the oldest now, is 19. He was 13 at the time. So I went and I was helping out. And immediately I was struck at the difference that Old Crescent this is in 2010, whatever it was, that when I started my journey Old Crescent, it was 1984 or something. Now in that window, the kids who were playing under 13s versus when I was are very different. It's a complete tapestry of society that exists. And one of the things that I think the RFU certainly has to reflect on is the history in the past. And Jerry Thorney had a piece in the paper during the week on that matter. But one of the other things that we need to reflect is in this moment in time, clubs like Old Crescent have engaged in a community that have no background in our sport. Like we have kids, we've got black kids playing, we've got European kids, we've got Asian kids playing. But to see the smile and the happiness of kids who have no background in the sport. Now, sometimes the parents of those kids don't understand the sport. They've no background. Sometimes we as coaches have to go around to the houses and collect the kids, encourage them to keep playing. And I think there's a positive story there that's well worth reflecting on, that our little club, and when we play like Ennis, when we play, Garryowen, Young Munsters, when we go out to the county, Newcastle West, etc., Nina, like we're seeing that across the section. So the community that is engaging in our sport has blossomed across a spectrum that's way different from when I started the journey. I think that's well worth reflecting on, and it's not worth patting ourselves on the back and congratulating, but it is a positive story where kids, and certainly in my experience, some of those kids, because their parents aren't necessarily from that sport, may not necessarily be encouraging it. And we've got coaches go around and collecting that. So their kids, like I was saying to my brother not so long ago, like these kids, no matter where they go after school, they have a passport for the world. Like this kid whose parents come from Africa, was born in Ireland, might find himself in Sydney in 12 years' time. We can rock up to Randwick and say, how you doing? I'm from Old Crescent in Limerick. I play rugby. Can I join your club? Like, that's an extraordinary, like for me as a coach, if I call myself that, that's a pretty cool outcome, I think.
OTB AM.
Right, time for the papers this morning. We're starting with OTBsports.com. This is the headlines. It's where, not if, Aaron Connolly should start for Ireland. An opinion piece from Cian Fahey there. And we also have There's an Omerta in boxing. Has Daniel Kinahan's role in the sport really changed? This is last night, Kieran Cunningham from the Star talking to the lads. And the OTB Brief this morning, which is a podcast you can subscribe to and get your morning sports fix delivered to whatever podcast app you're using, i.e. the OTB Sports app, which you can download from the Play Store. Just search OTB Sports. Free, gratis and for nothing, a roundup of everything that's coming up in the day's sport for you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Irish Independent this morning, Ger. Palace romp puts Reds on brink of ending their 30 years of heartache. Klopp's men will claim the Premier League title tonight if City fail to beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. A picture of Mo Salah, who came back from being left out of the game against Everton over an injury concern, and he delivered an assist and a goal, and everybody looked like they were in sync in that front three as well. And just continually worried times about the situation involving the RFU and the players' union at the moment, because obviously we know that they are looking for pay cuts with the 4 provinces among the Irish players, and they still have a long way to go. IRFU and players' body still poles apart, with talks on possible pay cuts deadlocked.
It's match reports and a match preview on the Examiner's front page. And swimmer vows to return after 1-year ban for unintentional doping violation. This is the eczema cream that young Irish swimmer Robbie Powell was using. Sport Ireland have accepted the fact that it was an inadvertent breach of doping protocols, and so instead of a 2-year ban, he gets a 1-year ban. He's only 20, and seemed to have a lot of supporting evidence to back up his claim. And there's also an interview with Daniel Tomofte, which I think was done in 2015 by Graham Clifford. That's a good piece you should dig into if you have any more stomach for nostalgia or history. It's not nostalgia, it's history. This is like, that's a really good piece and you should dig it out. What am I talking about?
The Times this morning, the Times Ireland, it's sparkling Liverpool on the brink. We know that they will be declared champions tonight if City don't get the job done against Chelsea. So it's kind of lost on me almost how seismic this is going to be, because we've been waiting for Liverpool to be declared champions for so long. It could actually happen tonight. I was 10 years old when Liverpool last lifted what was the old First Division trophy, then a very different trophy to what they could potentially lifting over the next couple of weeks. But yeah, by the close of business tonight, they could be champions. An interesting piece with Frank Lampard. Molly Hudson has written about it. It's in a couple of this morning's papers. Raheem Sterling wrong, says Lampard. And obviously Raheem Sterling was making the point that the opportunity that was afforded by Roman Abramovich to Frank Lampard at Chelsea, a rather inexperienced manager, a very young manager, it's the sort of opportunity that hasn't necessarily been afforded to black managers, Asian managers, or prospective managers in recent years. Lampard saying that yes, Sterling has a point about there aren't simply enough black managers in English football, but that isn't necessarily fair to point the finger at him, saying he deserved the opportunity he was given at Chelsea.
The Irish Times sports section this morning is Martial's hat-trick keeps United on front foot. Palace ransacked as Liverpool close in on long-awaited title, and the match reports from the rest of them there as well. And they've got more Italia 90 stuff on their second page as well this morning.
On the back of the mirror again, it's all about Liverpool, the Fab Four, the front three as well, all getting their goals last night. Firmino, Mane and Salah. FAI demand to restart. We talked about the Irish rugby situation there. They are still, after marathon talks yesterday, still looking to get an idea as to what the roadmap will be for a return of the League of Ireland. And again, a comment there from Frank Lampard on the comments of Raheem Sterling. Anthony Martial scoring a hat-trick last night, all with his right foot, all within 5 or 6 yards of the goal, all beautifully taken as they gave Sheffield United a bit of a trimming at Old Trafford.
The front of the Star this morning is World Chump. Cartel boss gets KO. Fury sacks Kinahan as his boxing advisor, but then later backs him to be PM. So I think there's probably a bit more to run in that story. And then back pages, it's over to blue. So obviously, Man City need to win tonight. A picture of Sergio Aguero sitting up in bed after knee surgery in Spain, and Lamps hits back at Sterling dig. I mean, I don't think he does hit back so much as try and broaden the conversation. I think. What's next?
Yeah, he hasn't hammered Raheem Sterling. He's just maybe pointed out there's a bit more nuance.
He praised Sterling for speaking up.
Yes, exactly.
2 years before everybody else was doing it. It was kind of, there hasn't been enough people backing Raheem Sterling. It was a point Daniel Harris made on the show. Where were Sterling's teammates? Where was Gareth Southgate? Where was everybody else when Sterling was being attacked by a couple of specific English newspapers? They continued to give interviews to those papers. They continued to work with those papers when it was pretty clear that Sterling was being targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. The back of the Irish Daily Mail this morning at the very top, Munster's bruising Bach. Allende has the class and pedigree to spark revival. I think now that the Irish provinces are getting back to training, it's going to be very interesting to see how the two Springboks that are now part of the Munster armoury settle in, because they could really be game changers for them once the season resumes. Obviously, there's a report from the Premier League last night, and there's a mention of Fury and Kinahan, but we spoke about it earlier in the show, Ger, the situation, stark situation now facing the USPGA Tour. Positive test spark wave of withdrawals. Derek Lawrenson says golf is in retreat. We talked about how they haven't necessarily handled it as well as they could and approached it with a certain level of naivety. There's a couple of very big weeks incoming for the PGA Tour.
The front of the Sun, Dan's plan goes down the pan. Bid to arrange big fight KO'd, which I'm not sure, because that big fight's going to happen. So, and the big part of the deal has already, it seems, been negotiated, as in Joshua will fight Tyson Fury, assuming Tyson Fury comes through his next fight, which is the rematch of his previous world title fight, which I suppose, isn't a guarantee, but we'll wait and see for that one. As I said, that story isn't over. Trent Stunner as foursome Reds are almost there. And PGA Tour COVID crisis as the Stars pull out. And flirty at 30, David O'Leary is glad he was the man to show the nation a good time 30 years ago. That's quite the headline. On this date in 1990, O'Leary converted the penalty to see off Romania in a World Cup shootout and book Ireland's quarter-final spot at Italia 90. It has not been forgotten. with the former defender recalling a recent encounter with a fan. This young lad said, "I want to buy you a pint. I was conceived after your penalty." There you go.
Too much information, perhaps.
Have you watched that penalty shootout recently? It was on a couple of weeks ago.
I've watched it a few times over the last few years, actually.
It's a good penalty shootout. It's good to watch it in high quality on your TV as opposed to... it needs to be a good HD copy of it, and I haven't seen one of those on YouTube. But it was good. It was tense. It was proper tense.
Oh, incredibly tense. It went down... Well, we'd 8 consecutive successful penalties before Daniel Timofte stepped up, and overall it was 9 from 10. So I mean, there are very few penalty shootouts nowadays where there's that level of quality. Actually, throughout that World Cup, you remember the quality of the German penalties against England. They were unstoppable. I think Shilton went the right way for all of them, and they didn't get anywhere near saving any of them. But even though you know what happened and the happiest of happy endings that transpired, there's still tension as you're watching it now 30 years later, and the hair is still standing up on the back of the neck, and you're still going, why is David O'Leary coming up to take this penalty? Was there nobody else?
O'Leary playing left back for the last 20 minutes as well.
And he dispatches it just like Alan Shearer or somebody else of his ilk would have done. I'm looking at The Guardian. It's mention of Liverpool as well. Champagne on ice. They sweep past Palace and close in on Coronation. But there's a piece on leisure centres at the moment, which are obviously still closed in the UK. And we are very close to reopening them here over in Ireland. I think the next week, certain leisure centres and gyms will be reopened. But the Prime Minister has been warned of generational harm by closed leisure centres. It's Baroness Tanny Gray-Thompson. She's written to the Prime Minister, but saying that a generation will be really struggling for public health if the closure on these leisure centres continues. And I guess that's an issue that's facing children in this country as well.
The Telegraph has a picture of Trent Alexander-Arnold celebrating after his free kick, a beautiful free kick against Palace last night. Vaughan and boycott fear for grassroots. That's a cricket story, and Liverpool on the brink of title glory is the front of the Telegraph for you this morning.
Back of the Herald, let's get it done. It's in our hands now, says pool goal hero Trent. Martial Law fine with Ollie as well after his hat-trick last night. And keep the back door open, a plea to the GAA. The Westmeath senior football manager has requested the GAA do keep some sort of a structure in place whereby counties will have a second chance. Some talk over a completely open draw, some talk over a straight knockout involving the provincial championships that they always stood pre-qualifier era of 2000. But he wants at least some sort of a second bite of the cherry for these counties, particularly if you are the side that is facing Dublin in the Leinster Championship. A straight knockout, old school style, is not exactly what you would be looking for.
Yeah, now I'm given to understand there's going to be a fresh draw made, and we'll have details of all that tomorrow, around about 11 o'clock tomorrow, so that we'll know exactly what the structures are going to be. That they've finalised everything in terms of the hurling and football championships, and full details on that will be coming tomorrow. So I don't know, there was definitely talk that it won't be a backdoor scenario for those teams, which would be a bit heartbreaking really, to have the entire 2020 campaign written off in 70 minutes of football. So sure, look, I suppose any port in a storm. The Irish News is next for us here. Stormont set to fall in line with South over dates for a GAA return. I'm sure the temptation to use the word united there was overwhelming. But anyway, crowds at early club games to be capped, and then martial law, and Robinson in mix for Northern Ireland jobs. So there's interviews imminent for the gig with the North.
And last for me, it's the Racing Post this morning. Bridging the gap, home comforts can help Chelsea trouble inform Chelsea. And the front page of the Racing Post, you can see the Tory delight after his first sit on Derby Hope English King. So it's an interesting one tonight, Jared, because on the face of it, a Sergio Aguero-less Manchester City have pretty much nothing to play for, where Chelsea have everything to play for. So I would say that there's a very good chance Liverpool might be celebrating around about 10 o'clock this evening.
And look, that might be the perfect end to this season, as opposed to them actually winning it on the pitch, but it will be disappointing. We're going to talk about that with Kieran Cunningham and Jon Walters in just a second. Before that, though, I do want to tell you about this, which is the OTB Sports app. Here is what is on the OTB Sports app this morning for you. Remember, you can pick your own sports, so you get to tailor the feed of news that's coming through for you. Obviously, we're number one there. There's stuff on Jeff Hendrick, but all of our podcast streams, the 40 podcasts, are all available for you there. You can check out our listen live to the show, you just click that button, or you can listen live to OTB Sports Radio 24 hours a day. There's top quality sports content, either live, the shows that we're doing, or the new podcast that we have, or the brilliant stuff from OTB Gold, which is the 18 years of archives that we have here on Off the Ball. So some absolutely brilliant stuff in there for you. Just search OTB Sports on Google Play or in the App Store and download the app, and you need never leave it again. Right, let us take a quick break, and we're going to be back with Jonathan Walters and Kieran Cunningham.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Football is back.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Missing this?
I remember Ollie texted me Solskjaer. One or two people would get hold of my number, unfortunately, and he would text me.
Then get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
This Friday at 12 o'clock, we're going to be giving you the chance to win €2,000, €2,000 in our brand new game show, Know Your Football. We've added another €1,000 to the fund as nobody answered all 15 questions correctly last week. You can register at quiz.otbsports.com. That's quiz.otbsports.com. Just log in before 12 o'clock on Friday to play along. Know Your Football is brought to you in association with Paddy Power. Check out paddypower.com for their great offers. And as always, gamble responsibly. Now, I'm delighted to say we've got Kieran Cunningham and Jonathan Walters with us. Lads, you're both very welcome. Jonathan, I want to start with you because I know that you've had some personal tragedy in your family recently, and you're raising money for it with a raffle and some amazing prizes, particularly for Republic of Ireland fans. It's the jersey that you scored a very famous goal for us in.
Yeah, look, the beginning of the month, my cousin who lived in Australia, he's from that south, but he's a chef, and he'd married recently, and he had a 2-year-old son, and he passed away very suddenly and sadly and unexpectedly, and he's left behind obviously a young wife and a 2-year-old son. He was the only one who worked in the family, so the whole family are trying to get together and get some money and try and support them and help them in any way we can. So I thought, one of the most important things during my playing career was that shirt I played in that night against Bosnia. So that one, the match worn shirt I had from that match, and rather than do it an auction or through eBay or anything like that, I thought I'd do it in a raffle way where I just said make a donation to a Just Giving page, which all goes to support his widow and his 2-year-old son. And I think I said put a $5 Australian donation, which is about £2.50, £2.60, something like that over here. And I'll pick a random one over the next couple of weeks to win it.
Sorry, how do people make the donation? We'll tweet the link to it, obviously, if anybody isn't here. But what's the easiest way to get onto that, Jonathan?
Just on my social media pages, so through Twitter and Instagram. I think I've left the link in my sort of bio right at the top of the page. And you just click on that link, it takes you straight to it.
And there's obviously also Burnley, Ipswich and other various jerseys from your career as well. From an Ireland perspective, obviously that was a hugely special night for us. So hopefully hundreds and thousands of people will actually just donate and be with a chance of winning that. So and we'll, as I said, we'll retweet that tweet, that the original one. So if anybody is looking for it, let's talk a little bit about football. Jonathan, we talked at the very start about this, about football coming back behind closed doors, and it seems like then you were very much of the opinion that it's not going to be quite the real deal. How do you feel now, watching it with the crowd noise or watching it without crowd noise?
I think that's the biggest bugbear for me. We all love football being back. For so long without it, everyone was desperate for it to come back. But Kenny will know this. The game's not the same as with the fans in the stadium. I think players feed off that energy, that the atmosphere that they create in the stadium, and without that, it's just not the same. It's almost like some teams are not going through the motions, but it just seems a pre-season friendly type game, and you can tell the teams like City, Wolves, Liverpool, those teams that'll be so difficult to play against in this type of game. It's a completely different match for me than no one playing it. I think it's a completely different match than when fans are in the stadium. So that's a difficult thing, and I've got to switch the fan noise off because it's not real. I'd like to hear what people are saying as well, a little bit of communication on the pitch.
Kenny, what are you watching, with or without the crowd noise?
Well, I haven't got the option. I wouldn't know how to switch it off, to be honest. I don't mind the crowd noise. I understand what John's saying, but I've been listening to it on the kind of German football there for a while, and it seems a lot better. I think the timing's everything, John, with the crowd noise. There's no point when a shot whistles over the crossbar and 3 seconds later you hear the big oop from the So for me, the timing is absolutely everything. I don't mind it so much, actually, the bit of noise. And I take John's point in regards to level of intensity in some of the games. I've noticed a distinct difference between some of the kind of German, even the Italian. I've watched some of the Italian football of late, the Coppa Italia semi-finals. Don't know if you have, John. And it's been good quality games. The tempo, the energy levels have been high. Good tempo to the games, moving the ball well. Almost the fitness levels of the players seem to be at a higher level than some of the English teams that I've seen. So that's interesting. Just in terms how that comes back to maybe how the teams have been training their physical conditioning during the time they've been off. But by and large, I've enjoyed the football. The games last night were okay, although a little bit one-sided. I enjoyed Chelsea's performance at Aston Villa the weekend. Even the Spurs Manchester United game, particularly second half, I thought was a decent standard. Yeah, there has been a little bit of dross sprinkled around that, but by and large, it's good to have the football back.
Can I just specifically, sorry, Dave, before you come in on that, the Chelsea game at the weekend, Damien Delaney was on co-com for us and made a great point with 5 minutes left to go. Villa are chasing it. They're at the bottom of the table. They're at home. They just need to lump the ball forward and get the crowd going and put a bit of pressure on Chelsea, and it was flat. There was nothing happening. There was no cavalry charge in the last 10 minutes. And it seems to me that actually that's a real thing. The crowd, G'ing the team up, putting a bit of pressure on the opposition, that is a real thing. That, like, we have now, that's gone. And that those teams at the bottom of the table, they're not going to be scraping out last-minute equalisers.
No, I think the only way you're going to get that is a bit of fatigue in the last. You see the teams that are a little bit fitter in the last 5 or 10 minutes because that'll be a huge factor. But definitely, look, the said all along, people get a bit nervous the last 5 or 10 minutes of the game. The fans really give you that energy in the stadium. You feel it as a player. You feel the whole momentum going your way, especially when you're chasing something and you're fighting for something. So I think that's the biggest difference you will see there was always a team that went on a late run, wasn't there? Sunderland did it for so many years, and the crowd were right behind them. We used to get so many late-minute goals. I don't think we'll see that this year.
Kenny, I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on that as well, because I know, unfortunately for you in your career, you did have some experience of what it was like to be in a relegation scrap. And I've heard guys like Gary Breen, Kevin, talking about the tension already within a team that is battling against the drop when they're playing in front of their own fans. There's almost a sense of anxiety from the kickoff that something's going to go wrong, that as soon as a player puts a ball out of play or overhits a pass or misses an open goal, that the whole energy drains out of the stadium, and that in the first half in particular, it can get on top of particularly a young team. So if you flip that, I get Ger's point on the last 10 minutes. If you want the whole end at Villa Park right behind you for a final 10-minute charge. But for the rest of the game, is there a way that it could actually help some of the teams who are looking to avoid the drop, that it's just them, it's just the 11 players on the pitch, and they don't have to worry about what's going on in the stands?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. For me, it is a twin-edged sword. I've played in relegation teams almost entirely the course of my career. And it does, those moments, like last 6-8 games of the season, those home games, there's almost a fear factor there. Generally speaking, you're not playing well. The confidence levels are low. There's tension in the crowd. There might be an initial surge of enthusiasm when you come on the pitch, the opening periods of the game. But very quickly that can dissipate. One misplaced pass, missed tackle, overhit pass, and very quickly you can get a sense of that tension and players retreat into their shells. So in some respects, you could argue no home support for the teams in the relegation end of the table. It actually should be an advantage, maybe, not having that that tension around the stadium amongst the home supporters, because it does translate to the players. And I've seen kind of younger players kind of fold a little bit in that kind of environment. I just think it's overplayed a little bit, actually, the actual crowd for me. I understand the arguments for and against, but for me, they're very minuscule. And I think it's pretty weak, to be honest with you, when I hear players, when I hear people talking about players losing their focus. There's no crowd there. They're just drifting mentally. They can't quite get themselves focused where they need to be. I just think you're in a pretty weak mental state if that's the case. I mean, John will know. I mean, I've some of, by and large, training sessions even. You come into the training ground in midweek, the manager sticks up an 11v11, all the bibs are out. Might be maybe 30 minutes each way on the training pitch, kind of proper game. They've been some of the most kind of intense games I've ever played on the training pitch against your own players, like pretty sterile environment. But it's kind of game on. It's a competitive game of football, and you should really be able to zone in and get on with it. It shouldn't be a question mark in terms of, well, there's no crowd here and I'm not really feeling, I just can't quite get myself to the level that I need to be at. When I start hearing those things come out of a football club from players at certain football clubs, I begin to get very worried about their prospects going forward. If that's the kind of mentality, if that's how brittle the mentality is among certain players at a football club.
I don't know about that, Kenny. I think you look at home form in teams, you look at home form and how down the years, home form's huge for teams. Every pitch is the same. You could say you go on a training pitch, they make the pitches exactly the same as a stadium, and near enough every pitch is the same. So there is something there, whether it's familiarity of your home stadium, and you can go into the mental state of players, and people who look there down the years, can you change the hotel? Can you bring your own pillows? Can you do that? Can you make it as homely as possible? There is something there, but there's also certain individuals that will also feed off the crowd. I think of one off the top. Craig Bellamy was a good one. Craig Bellamy used to feed off the hate that the crowd used to give him. You have people like that. And I used to, in a way, enjoy the crowd being there, and it's different. But you always remember those 11v11 games, a training game, and you'll play against, sometimes you'll bring the under-18s over and the 23s over. Sometimes you'll play the 11 that are not playing, will play against the 11 that are playing the next day. And a lot of the times, the team that you wouldn't think would win. It wouldn't be the first team that would win the game or give it a good game. It'll be the bomb squad or the young lads that'll turn the first team over. So I don't know. For me, I think they do play a huge part. But you're right in what you're saying. You can't blame it on the crowd. You can't say, oh, the crowd's not getting me going. You're a professional footballer. You should be getting up there. But there is something there. And as a player, I always fed off the energy of the crowd, whether it be for or against me.
What about those teams who are in limbo, where they're not in a relegation battle and they're not really going to be troubling either the Champions League or qualifying for Europe? It looks like some of those teams, Palace for example, are not as sharp maybe as they would have been if this game, last night's game for example, had been played when it was supposed to be played. Is it very hard for that team to get motivated to come back into, I don't know how many seasons you would have been involved in where you would have been safe with 7-8 games left to go, Jonathan, and like...
A shake of the head from Kenny there.
Not many. Safe with 7 games to go. You're mad.
There's always something to play for, isn't there? There's always, as a player, you always say a manager's what? 3 games, 4 games away from the sack. If a manager gets beaten 4 games on a run, the pressure's on him. There's always things to play for. There's always, especially now, I think there's a great chance to throw young players in with no crowd getting on the back there a little bit and give them a chance to shine and feel like they can do well in a Premier League setting. There's always those players coming through. There's players going for contracts. There's a lot of teams always trying to get in this sort of top 10. We need to get in the top 10. But the clubs, there's so much money at stake for every place. Managers are on bonuses, players are on bonuses. There's all sorts of things thrown into the mix. I'll never say there's nothing to play for.
But there were some players, John. John, you must remember being part of squads where you were safe with 10 games to go, and not every professional would have had the same attitude as you. Can you recall guys you would have been playing with where you can noticeably see a drop off in their application levels because mentally maybe they've already checked out?
Just trying to think. Probably the majority of the time was at Stoke, wasn't I? We were always desperate to get in the top 10. I think we missed out on it by the last game, about 2 or 3 seasons. The manager was fuming because I think he was on a big bonus if we got in the top 10. And I'm trying to think. There was always 1 or 2 that just went sort of, I'd switch off and start going out more and being late for training and things like that. You could see a mental shift on a couple, but I think it's up to the group of players, and we had a strong group, so we wouldn't let it sort of go. And there was always a thing about Tony Pulis' teams, wasn't it? He dropped off after they got safe, but it wasn't the case of us at Stoke. I think we were always trying to go for it, but the last couple of weeks we had a couple of people go missing for a couple of weeks. A few nights out, it just carried on, I think, all the way in. Things like that, but
I never got a nights out. I think, lads, there's a point there. I've been inside start. There's one thing I used to hate start of the season, John, you might have heard, when manager stood in front of the players, and first thing he said was, right, 40 points, lads. 40 points. This was before the ball had been kicked at the start of the season. And you hear that repeated week in, week out for like the first kind of 5 months of the season. And I think it does affect the mentality a little bit. If you do get into that position kind of February, March, April, you hit that 38, 40 point barrier. You've heard it so often during the season. This is what we're striving for, 40 points, staying up, staying out of the relegation. This is all that matters. When you do reach that point, it almost is, there is a mental switch of the button in your head. Very different for the manager then, having been preaching this mantra of 40 points all season, to suddenly stand in front of the players again at the start of April and say, listen, lads, forget about those 40 points we've been talking about all season. Let's kind of reset and go again for 50 or European football. So I always cringe when I hear the manager early in the season. We know the teams generally are going to be competing at the end of the season, who come out and say it's all about staying up, 38 points, that's all we're interested in. We're interested in nothing above that. Because for me, that's planting the wrong seed in the mindset in the psyche of your players.
No, I'd agree. There was a lot of managers that would do that, and you'd see they switch off, and anything else was a bonus after that 38, 40 points. The longer you get into the season, you look at Southampton, Brighton now. They're like that now. 2 more wins, we get to 39, 40 points. But I think at the start of the season, you're right. We had a really good one with Mark Hughes at Stoke when he came in. He used to break the season down into, I think it was 5 sections, and he'd get all the teams and the games up, and he'd say, come on, get your points, get where do you think you'll win, where do you think you'll lose, and it was surprising where you think you could get to, and results wouldn't go your way, and if you hit certain targets during the season. But he was all about breaking records. Can we break the record from last year? Can we have most goals scored, most wins, most home wins, most away wins? And he set a good structure up all the way through. And to be fair, you can say it worked, because every season he went on, I think at Stoke, he broke some sort of record of where the club was progressing in terms of placing the table or consecutive top 10 finishes. Can you get into 9? Where can you break up to? Can you push it for Europa League? So I like that the way he did it, rather than at the start of the season you're saying 38, 40 points, yeah.
It's funny, we just had Pat Lam on, who was the Connacht coach that won at Pro 14, and now he's at Bristol Bears, and he was saying, you actually need to aim really high, because if you don't aim really high, then you begin to settle and you make accommodations along the way, and all of a sudden it's very hard to shift that mindset from, we're trying to reach. So he was talking about Ireland in rugby and how, we really want to reach a World Cup semi-final, and he's like, why not try and win it, lads? Actually have that ambition, as opposed to, because once you get to the semi-final, it's like, well, we can retire now. And that's interesting to hear that Mark Hughes was like that and able to break it down. Was Mark Hughes a good manager?
Yeah. People always say who your best and who your worst, and I never pick anyone as a bad manager. Everyone had their own way of doing things. Some managers you'll enjoy more, enjoy the trainer more. The coaches will take it. Some managers really hands-on. Mark, he didn't take the training every day. He took it sometimes. He left it to Eddie Nowitzki and Mark Bowen, and the training was really good, really enjoyable. Damien Roden had a big part of that. And then He was quite quiet. He'd step in when he's needed. He didn't particularly like confrontation. Some managers would like that, but I don't think you can look at his sort of record with Stoke over the years and say he did a bad job, because we were in the top 10 so many times, and that was the aim of the club, to keep on progressing. You can probably question signings towards the end of his tenure at Stoke, but then you got to throw a director of football and other people into the mix as well, and how many decisions does he make? So, I enjoyed it with him. I enjoyed my time with him. I enjoyed Tony Pulis at Stoke. I enjoyed Mark at Stoke, and there was never any ill feelings or anything like that when I got left out towards the end, or when I left the club. I'm never like that with anyone. Don't hold grudges. So I bumped into him a couple of times since leaving Stoke, and I really enjoyed my time with him at Stoke, and it was a really good group of lads, and still a lot of people to speak to there from the time under Mark.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask a little bit about Manchester United's performance last night, Kenny. Dave was comparing them to Barcelona a little bit earlier on. I'm not misquoting you there, Dave, am I?
Yes, you are actually misquoting me. And I mean, it's unsurprising for you, Ger. Kenny, the point, I'll make it on my own behalf, if that's okay, and avoid Ger putting words in my mouth. I was saying at times they looked like Barcelona, but I suspected that was far more to do with the fact they were playing against a weakened Sheffield United team that didn't really put it up to them at all. Because in the last half an hour in particular, I'm not sure Sheffield United had the ball for more than 2 or 3 passes. United absolutely dominated them. So how much do you read into the United performance, the qualification being that they weren't really up against much last night?
No, I don't buy into that. You've got to give Sheffield United a lot more credit than that. They've been one of the most organised teams in the Premiership this season, set up really well by the manager. Very cohesive unit, in and out possession in the football. Don't make it easy for you to play. So I don't quite buy into that when they're up against no opposition. I think you have to give Manchester United...
Well, they were very poor, Kenny. Very poor against Newcastle earlier in the week. Awful against Newcastle.
Yeah, they weren't great. Like, obviously, they had a man sent off. John got sent off as well, didn't he? But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is I'm looking at Manchester United and their team transformed. And it's no surprise, really. And it's all about that midfield combination. It's having Pogba and Fernandes on the pitch in that midfield area. I mean, it's totally transformed the team from a creative point of view. We've all known about the sprinkling of talent United have high up the pitch with the likes of Martial, Rashford, Young, Greenwood was going to develop into an outstanding player, but it was all about the supply and that central midfield area. Who's got the craft, the quality in terms of their passing ability and that kind of link-up play. And with Hernandez and Pogba now in those almost advanced number 8 positions, although Pogba at times played a little bit deeper last night, that's the missing part for me, because it's totally transformed the team. I mean, Fernandez's ability to get forward and interact with the front three, Pogba as well, the goal scoring threat which they possess. They actually look as if now they enjoy playing with each other. I think the last Martial goal, you saw the ball from Pogba head up, picking out Fernandes 20 yards higher up the pitch, a little ball around the corner. That kind of combination play from midfield into forward areas of the pitch, we weren't seeing that the first half of the season for Manchester United. There's a little bit clunkier, the likes of McTominay, Fred and kind of Matic in those midfield areas. No disrespect to them, they're different type of players. So it's a huge plus for Manchester United, and it's the big question between now and the end of the season. Can Solskjaer sit down with Paul Pogba and thrash out his future and get a commitment to Pogba that he's going to not only is he going to see out next season, but maybe commit himself medium to long term to the football club? Because with Pogba and Fernandes in those 2 number 8 positions in midfield, with a whole midfielder behind them, you can take your pick. Fred and McTominay, I'd imagine Matic is not for the medium to long term. Fred, for me, prior to the lockdown, was probably looking like the one he could trust in that holding midfield position. And you need somebody very quick, dynamic in that area, the pitch, defensively minded, because if you're going to integrate Fernandes and Pogba into the team in those advanced midfield positions, you need to be able to trust that holding midfield to kind of sweep up behind them. But I've liked what I've saw with United. They're playing with real confidence, and it's the kind of presence and personality of Fernandes and Pogba for me, which has been instrumental and will continue to be so going forward.
John, Martin Tyler asked Gary Neville on commentary last night how surprised he was by the significance of the influence of Fernandes so early. I'd say he was the kind of player you'd love to have played with. Every touch is dripping with intent. It may not always come off, but he's always looking to play the ball forward. He's always looking to play around the corner, always looking to play it in behind. Have you been surprised with massive influence he's having. He almost looks like a leader of that team already, taking all the set pieces, all the penalties. He's mouthy. We saw him giving a bit of guff to Pep Guardiola before the lockdown. He just seems like he was made to be playing in that United team.
It doesn't surprise me, no, because for me, he's a world-class player. That's why he's gone to a club for such a fee, to Manchester United. And there's nothing better when I was playing, I was always a player that always tried to get him behind. Very rarely would I try to come to feet. My first look would always be getting him behind. And if someone can land on the ball and always look to put you in, there's nothing better. Always looking positive going forward. As a player, as a coach, you saw coaches going in and saying your first look has always got to be forward. It's always got to be positive. I used to hate players that used to just get it off the defence and pass it back and always go back and keep it slow. If you can go forward, go forward. And it looks like he's a player that does that. It's simple, go forward and join in. If you can't go forward, go sideways. If you can't go sideways, go back. It's very simple if you think of it like that, but it's hard to do for some players. It's a safe option sometimes to just play it back and go there, but he looks like he's just slotted in. And it doesn't surprise me at all for a player of that stature to go in. And I think Man United needed it, didn't they? They needed someone in there to really take hold of that midfield. You know, Pogba, who weren't missing, who was injured for a long time, and wouldn't really make an impact. Fred there, McTominay, a young lad. Who was going to get hold of that United midfield and really drive it? And he looks like to be the one. And to be fair, what a signing to pull off. And it seems to be the perfect player that they needed to bring a lot of it all together. And if you've got Martial in front, Rashford in front, pace like that, and people that are always going to try to get him behind, you've got a great combination of their players. You look at the Liverpool team, you look at last night, Salah's goal, as soon as Fabinho landed on it, you have four players that came short and pulled the defence on midfield. There was a big gap, and if you look at Salah's run, it was always out to win. He's constantly making those runs, and if Fernandes can have that, link-up play with Rashford and Martial in that team, you're looking at great attacking forces. And back to the United at old that we used to see, that were constantly attacking back in the early 2000s, and when they were winning everything, they were constantly attacking. It was always goals from them, and you have people driving the midfield at the time, and hopefully you can get that back, because they've always been one of the biggest teams in the world. It was great to have them back contending for the Premier League again with Liverpool, City, and the more teams you can get going for the league like that and improving, then great. And Solskjaer said he's not there yet. There's money there to be spent on certain players, the right players, and he seems to have complete control on the right players he wants at the club now. Then he might be a contender in time to come. And, they've shown all the good signs of going the right way. Yeah,
getting a hit like Fernandes would give anybody confidence that he knows what he's doing in the transfer window. There was two other quick stories about Irish players that I just wanted to get your take on. I might start with Jeff Hendrick and the possibility of him going to AC Milan. We were having this conversation a little bit earlier on about how the pace of play in Italian football might actually be something that suits Hendrick. And it was interesting when Sean Dyche was issuing his statement thanking him, he said that he played very well in a lot of different positions. And I think, Jonathan, it would be great to hear you explain to us a little bit about what his role was within the Ireland team, because it seems like he played quite a lot of different positions as opposed to just midfield or right side of midfield for Ireland, and that might have had an impact on his ability to impact games a little bit.
It is. If you look at players, you'll have certain players in fixed positions. You'll always have centre-halves. You'll have players that will play as wing-backs in a three. You'll have players like your traditional left-back, right-back. Then you'll have a sitting midfielder. And for years it's been Glenn Whelan. That's his sort of position. And Jeff, because he's technically very good, and he is very, very good technically on both feet in tight areas and everything. And because he's a good lad and he'll work extremely hard for the team, and I've seen how hard he works day in, day out, and then just through the stats and things like that, then you will get moved around quite a lot because you'll do a job, and you might not be doing a 10 out of 10 every week, but you do a job that the manager will trust you in that position, and he'll trust to move you around. Sometimes then you'll get a little bit lost in terms of the manager and the players will know what you're doing for the team, but the fans might be like, "Oh, what's Jeff doing playing? He's not doing great." But really, as a player, when he's in your team, you know he's doing a great job for you. So for years for Burnley, he's played. Well, they did play two up front for a while, and he was sort of before I came, they were playing two up front with Vokes and Barnes, and he was sort of a midfielder then, but he might go right, he might go left. But then when they played one up front, he was that one that played in behind, and he didn't really have a role of a midfielder. He was trying to make runs in behind, and he wouldn't really get on the ball a lot. And it was really frustrating for him, and I could see it. It was frustrating for him. And I knew it was frustrating for him because I'd speak to him. And then when they come in the Ireland setup, it's depending who you play against and who you're setting up against and where you position him. A great one for me was the Italy game, which was it was the other day. It was 4 years ago, wasn't it? And the other day they played in a diamond, and they moved them around with Robbie and Jeff and Wes. And it worked really well. And for me, that was his position. He can rotate in the field, he can get on the ball, he can turn, he can go forward, he can drive, he can link up with the strikers. You get him around the edge of the box. He has an unbelievable shot on him as well. And he has a bit of freedom there rather than just being, look, you're going to play behind the striker. You're going to be a number 10. We're not going to play to link up through you because 95% of our play is going to be long. So we want you to get in the channel balls and pick up the second balls. And really, that's not his role. I think Jeff's technically a very good player. He's probably been frustrated. He's been great that he's been playing Premier League so long for Burnley, but he's been frustrated because it's not his preferred role. And if he went to an Italian team or something like that, the pace will be slower. But Jeff can play at a high tempo. Just put him in the right position to play in that. He's very good with his feet technically in tight areas at other midfielders. You put him in a box in a training game, it's very hard to get it off him. He can move the ball very quickly, and he's a powerful player.
Kenny, the other story that I just wanted to get your take on was Stephen Ireland's back in the paper saying that he wants to make a bit of an Ireland comeback to put a bow or to maybe...
A bit like John Fair. I'm going to come back.
I almost didn't recognise him. The rest of the world has gone shaved heads in lockdown, and Jonathan Walters has this... amazing. Where has this been all your life, Jonathan?
Paying him a compliment before we came on air.
It's Barney, yeah. It's a lockdown haircut, isn't it? It's just grown. The grey's still in there. To be fair, when I was a player, I always wanted it short. I always wanted to look like I was, it had to be sharp and look like I meant business.
Ireland's George Clooney.
This is the longest it's ever been. It might stay as well, I don't know. It might stay. I tell you what, without product in now, it's out of control. It needs the water or gel in it because it gets very bushy.
I see a future for you for endorsements here. Your agent should be recommending that you keep it. Whoever your agent is these days, it's like, look, keep it. It suits you. Speaking of hair, Stephen Ireland, Kenny, any chance of a comeback for Ireland when he's not even playing football at the moment? Is this pie in the sky, or do you think it's possible?
Well, you've caught me by surprise there. I hadn't heard that story personally. It's good to hear he has the kind of motivation, still got the ambition that he wants to come back and play for Ireland.
Am I hearing this right, Steve? Is that right?
Yes. So he did an interview yesterday with Daniel Taylor in The Athletic, and apparently he's training with Bruno Fernandes. Footage emerged of himself and a couple of the other Man United players. Who's he with? So he's with Bruno Fernandes and
Diogo Dalot.
Yeah, and they're training, and he wants to play. You played with him for a good while, didn't you, Johnny?
Yeah. Look, technically, Stevie was always one of the best players in training. It was just, and he had a terrible injury. To be fair, he had a really bad leg break, really bad. It took him a long time to try and come back from that. I don't think he was ever right when he came back at the time I was at Stoke. Technically though, he was up there, but he was one of those where he'd be so good in training that you wouldn't really see the best of him again, whether it be some injuries. A few times I did play with him now, so I was talking about players before that always look forward, always look to put you in. He put me in quite a few times. I used to love playing with him in behind, because as soon as he got turned, I'd already made my run before he left the ball, he could see it. I just don't know. I'll come by. You've caught me by surprise here as well. I saw him playing a Man City charity game not too long ago, and he was looking. Well, it was about a year ago actually. He wasn't looking
a bit chunky.
He was looking a little bit heavy. I know he likes his mad training. He goes on random training sessions and does all sorts. So whether he's got himself really fit. I don't know. Do you fancy come back, Kenny? Me and you as well.
Do you know what? Good luck. At least he's got a bit of ambition. It's unlikely, you have your time and that's it. You move on. But you know what? We were talking about kind of positive vibes. Nice to hear some positive energy from people. So I'd say good luck to him. I take your point in terms of his career. And from a technical level, you're talking about Jeff, John. Stephen was as good as anything I've seen. I didn't play with him up close. I didn't have to look at him on the screen. I think, oh my God, this lad, in terms of his close control, ball manipulation, and like you said, getting himself into half turn and playing, was as good as we. If he came along just in a different era, maybe at a different time, he could easily have been a player. He could be talking about 70 or 80 Ireland caps. He really was that good.
You know what? If he's been training, as you said there, he does live in the area and he's friendly with a lot of those players. He lives in that sort of Hale, Wilmslow, Oldley Edge area, and if he is doing training, he might be doing the small-sided stuff or the technical stuff, and he's probably thinking, I'm as good as Easy, and he is. To be fair, he will be. He will be as good. Yeah. But I think top level now, is you're an athlete. I think you've got to do it for 90 minutes. You're an athlete. So if he is thinking about a comeback, at what level that'll be, I don't know. Because I think at Premier League level, even Championship now, it is full on. You've got to be an athlete for 90 minutes, and these players aren't just technically good. They're machines now. It's like highly tuned machines. It's very difficult. So if you can get him in any sort of, I don't know. I don't know if he's having you one or not. I don't know.
Fair enough. That sentence almost reached an end. It didn't quite make it there. Lads, great to have you with us this morning. Thanks a million. The Peter Brady Memorial Fund is available on GoFundMe, and the link is in Jonathan Walters' Twitter bio as well. It's the Ireland versus Bosnia match-worn shirt. A big night in Irish football history, and a big night in Jonathan Walters' career, and the match-worn shirt from that is available. You just need to make a donation to a very good cause, and as I said, we'll tweet that, and the link is in Jonathan Walters' bio as well. Good stuff, lads. Thanks a million for being with us this morning.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
I want to tell you about this. A reminder that as all of the sport begins to return, Now TV has all of the sports channels you need in 2 separate packs. You can watch Sky Sports on the Now TV Sky Sports Pass, and you can watch BT Sport and Premier Sports on the Sports Extra Pass. So these passes are available as a day, a week or a month pass options, and they allow you to stream live sports like Premier League, Serie A, PGA Tour Golf, Formula 1 and many more. You can search Now TV Sports to find out more. Dave, Liverpool can win the league tonight if Manchester City fail to beat Chelsea. This is, I'm very loath to weigh in behind Manchester City on very many occasions, given how much money they've spent and given the situation has been engineered for them to be successful the way it has been. But tonight, I would like Liverpool to have to win this on the field of play next week, ideally.
Against Manchester City as well, wouldn't it be?
Come on, that's what we want, right?
Yeah, I think it's a question for the Liverpool players maybe and Liverpool supporters. Would you like to get it done tonight, just sitting at home watching it, or would you rather sit and watch your team win a game and know that as the goal is going in, that is the goal that has won them the title? I'm not sure. I'm thinking of other clubs that have had waited a long time. I remember United, was it 26 years they had waited for the title in 92, 93 season, and they didn't get to win it themselves because I think Aston Villa were beaten in their penultimate game, and United, their final game was at home against Blackburn Rovers, and it was a celebration rather than a coronation because they'd already been declared champions. City, obviously, the most spectacular aspect of it was 2012 when they certainly did it on the field with those late goals against QPR. So it's probably a question for Liverpool supporters. My suspicion would be that they would rather go to the Etihad and do it there, because how fitting would that be? I do feel it will be over tonight, though. I just think City have lost Aguero and they have nothing to play for, and they are really looking at a tilt at the Champions League. They need to be peaking in 8 weeks' time or 6 weeks' time. It doesn't really matter how they play tonight. And for that reason, with Chelsea trying to hold off Wolves and Manchester United for that 4th place, if indeed 4th is what's required, we'll see how that case with City goes in the European courts. But I think Chelsea will just have too much motivation tonight. For me, the Premier League season will be done this evening, mathematically. It's been done for a long time, obviously, but technically it'll be done tonight.
All right, Games Live with the lads. You can hear it on the OTB Sports app. Search OTB Sports on the Play Store or indeed on the Apple Store. It's also on the radio and News Talk tonight. Now, let's head down under and the news that Conor McKenna has had successive negative tests for COVID-19 after there was a finding which was adverse in the interim, had led to a massive storm in Australia's sports media, and I think beyond that as well. Catherine Murphy is a sports reporter with ABC in Melbourne and joins us now. Catherine, you've been in contact with Conor McKenna throughout this. What has his mood been like as he became a scapegoat for and a lightning rod for a lot of negativity in the Australian media over the last while?
He certainly did become a scapegoat, and good morning to you. It's obviously evening here. I can say that Conor has been so impressive. He has been so humorous along the way, Ger. Like, it's almost been quite comical, because I was in the office when we heard a rumour that Conor might now be negative. So my boss said to me, he's not negative, is he? So I just texted him and said, Conor, you're not negative now, are you? And he wrote back, lol, yep, can you believe it, Catherine, I'm negative. And I was like, oh, like, this is huge, Conor. You sure you're negative? And he's like, yep, lol, I don't know what this means. So you can imagine, because it was such a huge story, and the first positive coronavirus case in sport was always going to be a huge story. He's just so unlucky that it was him. So as you can imagine, it's 20 to 7. Our news is at 7 o'clock. I'm racing up to the live area on the roof, and I'm asking Conor, what should I say? What would you like me to say? And he's more or less saying, I've ordered all this food for 2 weeks. What am I going to do now? So he was just so humorous about all of it. He said that he was still stuck in his bedroom. He couldn't even come out and watch the news, because he lives with his brother and his brother's partner, so was stuck in his room on the Xbox while we went live on the news. And I was trying to contact the AFL, and obviously it's such an unprecedented year, and that's the most overused word in media right now, but the AFL didn't have a plan for Conor testing negative. They had a plan for if a player would test positive. Now today, we know he's had a second negative. The AFL still don't know what that means. And really, it's the first time in the history of sport that the Department of Health and Human Services are more important to the selection of a team than the actual coach. And the coach admitted that. So still deciding what will happen. The Chief Medical Officer or Health Officer here in Melbourne says that Conor will still have to quarantine. But it's been an incredible story.
I mean, I think it speaks to a load of different things, the efficacy of the testing. The other thing is that it has actually become a bit of a global story. So there's a couple of American football podcasts that I listen to where they were actually talking about this one player who tested positive after 12,000 negative tests in the AFL. Is that 12,000 figure fairly accurate? Because it would suggest that the AFL have got this very right up to this point.
They have. They have taken extreme measures, Ger. So every player is tested twice a week. And Conor was asymptomatic with all his teammates when an irregular test came back last Friday. That was after he tested negative 5 times since leaving hotel quarantine after his return from Ireland, because, of course, he went home to County Tyrone for a few weeks. So he came back with an irregular test. They tested him first thing Saturday morning. It was a huge, huge shock, because the AFL CEO, Gillan McLaughlin, called a press conference here at very short notice on the Saturday. We heard a rumour that someone had tested positive. I couldn't believe it was Conor. I was on my way to the press conference when I heard. And it was just such a body blow to everything, because the AFL have worked really hard to put incredibly strict protocols together so they can get the game back on TV, Ger, because they need the broadcast money. That's where they make all of their money. They've had to renegotiate that broadcast deal for significantly less and even offer discounts for the next 2 years, because the economy is already so affected by what's happened in this crisis. So it was a huge blow, but they've showed they're determined to keep going. So right now, one of Conor's teammates is also quarantined. Now, you won't believe this. Only one of his teammates from a full contact training session was deemed to be a close contact of Connor's. So his very unlucky wrestling partner, James Stewart, is also in quarantine, even though he's consistently tested negative.
It is
Catherine,
really bizarre situation.
Sorry, Jerry. Do you know, Catherine, how many days were there between Connor's last negative test and the inconclusive test that was followed by the positive one?
Good morning, Dave. So there was only a few days. His last negative test was last Wednesday. Then he did his test, a pre-match test, they call it, on the Friday. That was irregular because clearly I'm no medical expert, but apparently the levels in his system were so low that they retested him on the Saturday morning. So only 2 days between a positive test and a negative test, and he had had those 5 negative tests. So it was a huge shock for the club.
So, because the Chief Medical Officer, Victoria, that you've mentioned there, has said one possible explanation is that he had the virus, but there was just the dregs of it remaining, and that's what led to the negative test. But I mean, that's not possible if there's such a short space of time between that whole series of negative tests and the inconclusive test. He can't possibly have had it for 2 days, contracted it in 2-day period, and then it have left his system 3 days later. So he's saying it's highly unlikely that it was a positive or that it was a false positive. But it would appear, and I'm obviously no medical officer, but it would appear that's the only explanation.
It's incredible, and there's so much we don't know, and there's so much that even epidemiologists say they don't know about this. But I did ask the question at that press conference, the AFL press conference. A lot of Irish players came back from Ireland and went into quarantine. It does seem very unlucky to me that the one player who's tested positive in 13,000 tests is a guy who's just come back from Ireland. It does seem very unlucky that he's picked it up at a house inspection or on a takeaway coffee cup. It seems highly unlikely, but again, just prefacing that clearly none of us know, and certainly not in my department, the sports department, which in my newsroom they affectionately call it the toy department. So I won't be making any medical comments or theories on it.
Catherine, there was speculation that this might hasten his return to Tyrone. Can you quash that for us? Is there anything in that, do you think?
I don't think so, not for now. Connor's made it really clear that at one point he definitely wants to go home, and he's been really clear with the club about that, and they know that. They're disappointed by that because he's an incredibly talented player. I'll be very sad to see him go because one of the highlights for me, he soloed in a match randomly, and it was so shocking. I was at a bar back when we were allowed to go to bars and watch TV and mingle, and I saw him solo on the TV, and the whole bar is like, what just happened there? And I was like, it's a solo. It was the best thing I've ever seen. We'll so miss him when he does decide to go home. But there was a former player who speculated this could be the end of his career in Australia. In fact, there were a lot of former players coming out with big opinions about how Connor's week was going, and they hadn't even spoken to him. All I can say is he's in incredibly high spirits. He's a very strong young man. Helps that he hasn't been able to see any of the TV. He's kept away from media. He's had to stay in his room. He's in very high spirits. He's just looking forward to getting out and playing football.
Catherine, you'll be familiar with the AFL guidelines as laid out as they sought a resumption of play. Did Connor breach those guidelines?
So there's a lot of confusion about this, to be honest, and it's still ongoing. So the AFL are very strict about big breaches in protocol. For example, Melbourne football team had 2 players that went to a party and they were immediately sanctioned. One player, the more senior player, got 2 weeks suspension. The other younger player got 1 week. So they're taking breaches very seriously. Connor did, I believe, go to a house inspection because his lease is running out. It's still unclear whether that was technically a breach of the rules because there are rules in place surrounding being allowed to go to house inspections if you're selling your house. I don't believe they had a provision in the rules for what you're supposed to do if your lease is running out and you want to view a property. And if they had a clear rule, Connor would have been suspended by now. I've spoken to an AFL official who has told me that they are looking at it, but it's not the priority. Suspending him is not really their first priority right now. He may get a week for that house inspection, but the really harsh thing has been the media judged him straight away and almost said he should be written off because he caught the virus. So there's certainly no suspension criteria for catching a virus, and really his actions should be judged proportionately. And I think going to a house party with one of your teammates is certainly way higher up the list than going to a house inspection. So I'm reliably informed by the AFL that he certainly didn't do anything silly. He certainly wasn't out socialising.
And because of the reaction of the media over there, and it's been over the top, to say the least, do you think the AFL will reassess the manner in which they approach these situations? If somebody was to fail a test today, for example, do you think they will keep that name under wraps until they've been able to get through a full investigation of it themselves? Because making his name public so early in the process was clearly very unfair on him.
Well, in fairness to the AFL, I think they have no choice but to name players, because it's difficult to even put into words the level of obsession with Australian rules football in Melbourne. So Connor was selected to play that week, and it was due to be his first game back since he returned from Ireland. So all of the cameras, all of the spotlight was on him anyway. If Connor suddenly disappeared from training or the captain's run, everyone would be looking for him. What's happened to Connor? Has he gone home to Ireland? Is he finding it too tough to be away from his family? So they would have had to answer. And I think that he was so unfortunate to be the first one. But here, the number of reporters, it's completely saturated the media here. You go missing at training, there's an investigation. And I feel they almost had no option but to name him. And also now they've had to name, of course, the other player who is now in isolation.
What's your take on the response to what has happened from the Australian media? Obviously, you know, you're Irish, you wonder, is there an Irish element to this? Was it like, if it had been an Australian superstar, would the backlash against him have been quite so severe? Maybe that's a silly line of questioning, I don't know, but certainly it feels like perhaps we're being a bit overprotective, and actually this is just what happens when you're an elite sports person. Your every move is held up to the light. What's your take as somebody who understands how the Australian media works? Were they over the top?
They were definitely over the top, but I don't think it's because he was Irish. I think whoever this happened to, it was going to be a huge story. We did a Zoom press conference with the CEO of Essendon the other day, Xavier Campbell, and I asked him the question. I said to him, do you feel Connor's been demonised by certain aspects of the media, and are you worried about his mental health because of that? And as he said, certain reporters took liberties. In Melbourne, and particularly in the AFL journalism bubble, as you can say, it is a race to be right, to be first, not right. There's not a lot of fact-checking. There are some reporters who skip that part of the journalism process because they're under so much pressure to get that headline. There's a lot of former players in the media with big opinions, and I think that's what Connor suffered from, an AFL sports reporting bubble that is so intense and so heavily scrutinised. Honestly, I can't compare it to home because I was shocked by it when I got here, because back home we support every sport, you know, and I got here and the level of intensity and fanaticism is like something you wouldn't believe.
Are you concerned about his mental health at all?
No, Connor has told me he's fine. I was really worried about him because for anyone, like, I know what it's like to wake up every day and your family are the other side of the world. And, you know, the easy thing about living abroad is they were always just a plane ride away. So once borders shut, I think as a human, the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning is you live in a country and your family aren't here. They're a long way away, and it weighs on your mind every day. So I was worried about Connor having that weigh on his mind, and then the media storm that surrounded him. But Connor's assured me he's doing really well. He's so funny. This morning, I messaged him and said, what's your media statement today? What do I have for the news? And he said, it's tough waking up every day with a stick up your nose. That's his statement for today. He's been so humorous, and, you know, the Irish community have really rallied around him. The other Irish players, we all look out for each other. So Conor assures me he's doing well, and his club and the AFL are really supporting him.
Catherine, great stuff. Your reporting on this has been spot on the whole way along, and it has turned into an absolutely massive story, because obviously the NFL are watching to see what happens, the NBA are watching to see what happens, and to see exactly how well the AFL have managed it. So great reporting, and thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ger. I'm a huge fan of the show, as are my family. So lovely to talk to you.
Where are your family from?
From Cavan. So they're all watching.
Okay,
they're a huge fan of you guys.
Say hello to them. Say hello to them.
Yeah, say hi to my mum and dad, my brother Richard with my little niece Lily, and my sister Joanne, who's busy at work. So she works on the front line. So she's too busy to watch, but my brother and my niece are tuning in, and my mum and dad, Lily and John.
Tell her to get the podcast on the OTB Sports app a little bit later. Catherine, great stuff.
She will. She listens every day.
And hello to all the Murphys out there in Cavan as well. That is one of those global stories that ends up being a pretty local one in the end. And look, I suppose, Dave, if you're a Tyrone fan, your ears pricked up with that. He wants to come home at some point.
Yeah, and I think any player who goes over does want to come home at some point, and they do see themselves maybe giving their best years to the AFL, but still been in a position where they can contribute, whether it's just to their club or to their county team in years to come. And we've seen Tyson Fury do it and then go back, for example. But I think it's wishful thinking. This guy is on the verge of being a superstar in the AFL, and it'll be quite a while that they will have to wait before they see him wearing the white shirt to Tyrone again, I suspect.
All right, Dave, good stuff. Thanks for being with us this morning. It's 5 minutes past 10. We've gone a little bit over there, but obviously that was some breaking news to bring you at the end of the show. That is it from OTB AM this morning. We had a brilliant Pat Lam interview from about 20 past 8 to nearly 9 o'clock. Then we heard from Brian Kerr, Jon Walters and Kenny Cunningham talking football. Catherine Murphy there on the Conor McKenna case in the AFL. The best place to listen back to our podcasts on the OTB Podcast Network is now on the OTB Sports app, which you can download in the Play Store. Just search OTB Sports in Google Play or indeed in the App Store, and you'll get it there. And it's just really easy now to subscribe to all of our podcasts, and you can personalise your newsfeed and all that kind of stuff as well. So it looks slick, and it's working really well. If you have any feedback for us as well, we'd like to hear from you. Tonight from 7 o'clock, John Giles joins Nathan. Then there's live Premier League commentary of Manchester City against Chelsea. The best place to listen, as I said, is the OTB Sports app, where you can download right now. Will we finally see Liverpool win the league tonight?
25 yards out, just to the right of centre. Alexander-Arnold steps up, gets it over and smashes it into the back of the net. Trent Alexander-Arnold scores. Wonderful free kick, and the local boy sends Liverpool one step closer to the promised land. It could be a chance for second. Salah's in behind. Salah scores. And that should be that. Mo Salah makes it Liverpool 2, Crystal Palace 0. A long ball forward, and he took it on his instep. Perfect control from the Egyptian. And then with his left foot just touched it past the onrushing Wayne Hennessy. And just before half-time, Liverpool have doubled their advantage. A 17th Premier League goal of the season for who else but Mo Salah. It's Liverpool 2, Palace 0. Fabinho from a long, long way. Oh, what a goal, Fabinho. He must have been 35 yards out there. Just step back, right foot, and like a bullet past Wayne Hennessy. And Liverpool in total control, lead by 3 goals to 0. He scored a cracker, a hugely important goal against Manchester City at the opposite end of the pitch back in January. This one was even better. Brazilian brilliance, and Fabinho makes it Liverpool 3, Crystal Palace 0. To Salah, first time forward, releases Mane. Could be a chance for fourth. First big opportunity, Sadio Mane on his right foot, gets the shot off and buries it into the back of the net. Liverpool clinical. One mistake from Townsend, and a rapid-fire attack from Firmino to Salah, who provided the assist. And we had just said he'd had a quiet game, Sadio Mane, but he made no mistake. Plenty of time to think about it when he was released first time from deep, from inside his own half by Mo Salah. Onside Sadio Mane, and we've seen him with that finish so many times this season. Right-footed low into the bottom right-hand corner. 15 in the Premier League for Sadio Mane. 4-0 to Liverpool with 22 minutes to go.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.